Yeah, I feel the same way about something.
Go ahead and call the meeting to order, please. Getting to my agenda instead of my minutes. So we have a determination of quorum, please.
Sarah Shavelicek,
Present.
Larry Chesney,
Present.
James Barnes,
Here?
Thomas Bruce,
Here.
Francine Donchik,
Present.
Philip Horan,
Here.
Michael Lawson.
Present.
Wonderful. Thank you. Commissioner Barnes, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yes, would you join me, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ethics law announcement, please.
Commissioners are reminded that if with respect to any matter or any person coming before the commission today, you've received a gift or loan, you have a pecuniary interest, you have a commitment in a private capacity, such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship, or you provided representation or counseling related to the matter being considered to a person or entity for compensation before another agency within the previous year, you must disclose that gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation at the time the matter is being considered. And you must furthermore abstain from deliberation on or voting on the matter if it is clear that the gift, loan, interest, commitment, or prior representation would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Commissioners are also reminded that under the Planning Commission rules, if you have had any contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the Commission today, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting.
Thank you very much. I've also been asked to remind everyone, and we'll be doing reminders throughout the evening, is that our recording secretaries use the audio recording to get our minutes clear. So we're asked to make sure that our mic is on and speak close to our microphones. That's for commissioners and for staff. The appeal procedure, please, Mr. Webb.
Yes, ma'am. And before I begin, the planning commissioners might wonder why Trevor Lloyd is sitting up here next to me. I have the pleasure to announce that Trevor Lloyd was promoted to the second planning manager position effective 2 weeks ago. Trevor and I are doing a transition program, and at some point Trevor will take over as the secretary for this commission. In the interim, I drug him along and put him up here with me so he can see what I do, which is not hard, but at least he'll be transitioning into that secretary position. So I just wanted you to know why he was there.
Thank you.
For the appeal procedure
And
itself,
congratulations.
most decisions rendered by the Planning Commission are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Planning Commission and you want to appeal its action, you may do so in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is signed by the Planning Commissioner Chair and/or the Secretary of the Planning Commission, filed with the Secretary of the Planning Commission, and mailed to the original applicant and the proceedings be appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call planning staff immediately at 328-6100 for information on the appeal procedure and application fee. I might note for the members of the audience and also for the Planning Commissioner that all the public hearing items this evening, items 9A through D, are all Development Code amendments. Development Code amendments are only appealable if they are denied by the Planning Commission. If the Planning Commission takes actions to recommend approval, those automatically move forward to the Board of County Commissioners for a first and ultimately a second reading.
Thank you very much. Do we have any general public comment?
We do not.
Thank you. On to possible action to approve the agenda. Before we move on to that, I will note to the commissioners that item 8A, a presentation and possible discussion for the regional plan, is being continued to our November 7th meeting. The survey is just launched within the last 2 or 3 weeks, and they're wanting to compile some of the data before they come and make a presentation to us. So item 8A is continued to November 7th, and we have been requested to move item 9C before 9B. So with those changes, I'll entertain a motion to amend.
With those changes, I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Haran and seconded by Commissioner Chesney. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. It's possible action to approve the September 5th draft minutes.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Donchak and seconded by Commissioner Chesney. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We're now to planning items. Planning item 9A. If we could read this item, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I might, this is the public hearing items, 9A. Development Code Amendment, case number WDCA 17-0002, water rights. For possible action, hearing and discussion to amend Washoe County Code Chapter 110 within Article 422, water and sewer resource requirements, to remove the requirement to dedicate water rights to Washoe County for commercial, industrial, or civic uses in areas not served by the Truckee Meadows Water Authority or a general improvement district, and other matters necessarily connected therein and pertaining thereto. And, if approved, although the amendment is recommended, to authorize the chair to sign the resolution to that effect. The staff planner is Ms. Mullen, who, I might add, was promoted to senior planner, effective as of today. And she just returned today from a vacation in Hawaii, so she is maybe not jet lagged, but certainly jet behind. But I wanted to offer my congratulations on her promotion to senior planner.
Yes, congratulations. Disclosures by commissioners, either ethics or ex parte communications on this item?
None.
Seeing none? Okay, staff presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the commission. I'm Kelly Mullen, Senior Planner with Washoe County, and we are going to be discussing this evening an amendment to Article 422, specifically related to water rights. And at this point, I'm actually going to hand this presentation off to Water Management Planner Coordinator Vahid Bemaram, and he's going to talk through some of the reasoning behind the proposed changes and the specifics of what we're looking at tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, Vahid Bemaram, Water Rights Manager, used to be Water Rights Manager, Water Management Planner Coordinator. In order for what we're going to discuss tonight to make some sense, we have to go back. I have to kind of set the background where some of these rules and regulations came about. Article 422 originally was established as Ordinance 586 back in 1984. It became effective January of 85, I believe. Broadly, its goal was sustainably manage the region's water resources. That's a very broad statement. What did that mean? Water rights. It meant we wanted to make sure every development within unincorporated Washoe County had adequate water rights accounted for it. So that was the method, the instrument we accomplished our goal through water rights. Back in the 1980s with Sierra Pacific Power Company, who was the major water purveyor, there was a particular tax called kayak tax, CIAC, Contribution in Aid of Construction. In order for that tax to be not applicable, Reno, Sparks, and Washoe County, the developers would dedicate the water rights. These are for subdivisions. This is in the metropolitan area. We are not yet in the unincorporated urban parts of Washoe, outside of the metropolitan areas. This was within the service area of Sierra Pacific Power Company. The developers would dedicate water rights to Reno, or Sparks or Washoe County, depending on where the subdivision or the project was located. And then that local government would lease the water rights back to Sierra Pacific for 99 years with an automatic renewal. That avoided the kayak tax. I don't know much more about that. It was discontinued in mid-90s, so it's been a while. So this process, this procedure of water rights dedication and lease back, its origins really has to do with Sierra Pacific and their water operation. A lot of the text, a lot of the language in these 99-year leases were established by legal staff at Sierra Pacific. So that's one piece of information. What else was going on in the 1980s, early 80s? Parcel maps. Parcel maps outside of water service area of Sierra Pacific, where those parcels relied on domestic wells for their water service. State engineer's office is required by law to review a lot of projects, subdivisions, mining, agriculture. There is a process in place for them to become aware and review and approve those projects. Not parcel maps. Parcel maps were done by the local governments. In the 1980s, it became clear, both for the state and the local governments, that every time a local government approves a parcel map, creates 3 new parcels with a domestic well, it has an impact on the water resources that the state engineer was not accounting for. Stagecoach, Nevada is a textbook example of this. Most of the residential lots in Stagecoach, Nevada, are developed by parcel maps. Therefore, the water rights were not accounted for. If you have created 100 lots with domestic wells, there's 200 acre-feet of water rights. That's the state engineer is not aware of, and he's not deducting from the yield of the basin. So that was another major reason for Article 422 and Ordinance 586, its predecessor. What are we left with? We dealt with everything in the metropolitan area, in the outskirts of town, parcel maps. Commercial industrial projects like a dog kennel, horse boarding operations, those are what we see quite a bit. In East Washoe Valley, there are even some small apartment buildings that were not on any municipal water service. State of Nevada, similar to parcel maps, was not in the loop to review those. Washoe County put all of these together and said, okay, we need to address parcel maps. We have this method of water rights dedication and lease back with Sierra Pacific. There are these other projects in the unincorporated Washoe County that either need a special use permit, a building permit, a business license from Washoe County. They also have an impact on water resources. So we wrapped all of this and said, any kind of development in Washoe County that has an impact on water resources has to address the water rights, either by dedication to Washoe County for parcel maps or with a dedication and a lease back with commercial projects. That's how we did it. If somebody has a dog kennel or a horse boarding operation, they're a small water company of their own. So they would dedicate water rights to us. We would lease it back to them for 99 years so they could manage the project and remain in conformance with the water law. So with that, we created this mandate for dedication of water rights for all commercial industrial projects in unincorporated Washoe County. In 2015, upon the merger of Washoe County Water Utilities with Tamwa, we brought forth one set of major amendments to Article 422. That dealt mostly with that metropolitan realm. Truckee Meadows Water Authority, all the GIDs, all the private water entities, we exempted all of those. So that happened in 2015. With parcel maps, there was a change in the state law. The state of Nevada implemented provisions in NRS that created this relinquishment process, where for parcel maps, residential parcel maps with domestic wells, rather than the water rights be dedicated to Washoe County, you relinquish it to state of Nevada. It creates a means for them to account for those water rights, for those domestic wells. So post 2015, what we are left with, parcel maps are addressed through relinquishment process. All the other major water purveyors, Truckee Meadows Water Authority, GIDs, are exempt within the Article 422. So we were left with this mandate within Article 422 that applied to commercial industrial projects. Why are we here today? There has been 2 lawsuits filed against Washoe County in regards to this dedication requirement. One was back in the early 2000s. Utilities Inc. Nevada, the water purveyor in Cold Springs, brought that suit. We settled that by by requiring the dedication of water rights, and we would impose deed restrictions on those water rights and deed it back to Utilities Inc. So that was dealt with in that manner. In 2017, another lawsuit was filed, which prompted us to look at Article 422. And the Board of County Commissioners asked the staff to look at other alternatives. In doing that, we realized that we can manage these, we can reach our objective, we can manage the water resources without the requirement for dedication and the lease back. How do we do that? We recognize that there is a lot of data now available from the State Engineer's Office on their website. It's real-time data, and there is also a procedure in place where the state engineer can notify local governments of any changes that are occurring. So if there's a commercial project and they sell off a portion of their water rights, we will be notified. If the permit is neglected and is subject to cancellation, we will be notified. So we saw other means of accomplishing our goal without having to go through the dedication and the 99-year lease back process. And that's where we basically are today. Let's see. The County Commission has requested this change. We are doing away with the mandate. There is still the possibility for the county to require dedication of water rights. We are not closing that door permanently, but we are providing another alternative without a project owner having to dedicate their water rights. All projects, we are still going to do the same things. We're going to still review all projects as to their water rights needs, as to their water resources needs. But we're gonna stop short of requiring dedication. We will ensure there is sufficient water rights. They're in conformance with the state water law. They're in conformance with the county code. We will stop there. We will not require the dedication of water rights at that point. Some of the changes within this current amendment, we add the definition of the GID, which was left off in the 2015 set of amendments. We introduced this ability for us to have the project owner simply demonstrate ownership and availability of sufficient water rights. That was not spelled out in the code before. We're adding that to the text of the code. We provide for a process where all the people in the past, to be fair, all the people who were subject to this dedication requirement, we are providing a process for them to get their water rights back, to cancel the 99-year leases and reconvey the water rights back to them. And there are some refinement and clarification of the language within the Article 422. With that, I think I will stop and open it to any questions you may have. And then Kelly will go through some of the procedural issues.
Madam Chair, if I just might,
Yes.
neither legal counsel nor myself can remember, did you actually open the public hearing prior to staff presentation?
Yes, I did.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Haran.
This light's on. There it is.
There it is. Now speak into your microphone.
I want to speak into the microphone.
When you got up there on the previous slide, you said definition for the GID. What does that mean?
In the 2015 amendments to the Article 422, we exempted general improvement districts, but there was no definition. We have to define everything in the code. It's a technicality. It just provides the legal definition of what a GID, general improvement district, is.
Was that referred to how it's created under the NRS?
Yes.
318?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And for Commissioner Haran, that's actually on page 3 of 6 of the suggested amendments, sort of in the middle there, item G. I tried to find it, but I couldn't.
Other questions
Thank
from
you.
commissioners?
Madam Chair, may
Absolutely.
I? What are the dangers? I have some concerns about retroactively giving all of these water rights back. It seems to me that there's some danger exists in this strategy. I'm not sure what the benefit is, and I'm not sure what the dangers are. Can you elaborate?
Very good question. Let's go back again. Some years ago, water rights were very cheap. Water rights were something that you bought in the beginning of the project. You either gave it to the utility or satisfied some requirements, and you forgot about them. We all know in the last 10 years what has happened to the water rights market. Everybody, all real estate agents, anybody who develops any kind of property are well aware of the significance and value of water rights. So what are the dangers? It used to be that. It used to be a commercial, some commercial project owner would buy the water rights, transfer them to their property, but would not maintain it. When we were in the ownership chain of title, when the water rights were dedicated to us, we were the safety net. We prevented that from happening. We would make sure they paid us for all the filing fees with state of Nevada, but we made all the filings if they did not do it. So that's one potential risk where we make sure they are in conformance, we make sure they have adequate water rights. Some years passed, and due to negligence, the water rights may get canceled. So that's one area of potential risk. If there, we've even seen in the historical time that, in the past, that a commercial business owner, they need revenue, they need money, they'd sell off their water rights and continue with their commercial projects. I think we can address that. I think through this notification process by the state of Nevada, or the ability for us to review the water rights on their website, I think we can monitor that and prevent that loophole. Those are the risks that come to my mind. Unless there are some unintended consequences that I can't think of right now, those are the risks.
And if I might, following on to that, what is not mentioned there is the tie-in back to the original development. Remember, the development's being approved and still will be approved for the offerings of a reconveyance, in this case, of these water rights. That ties back to the project. If those water rights go away, you're then violating a condition of the original approval and can then jeopardize either a business license, if it's simply a business license for the operation of the commercial, or even potentially a business license, and if it was some sort of administrative or special use permit, you could jeopardize that, because then you're violating the conditions of either the license or the use permit.
I appreciate the explanation of risk. I'd like a better understanding of the benefit.
The benefits. Well, for one thing, the lawsuit will go away. We don't have to have that fight. No, I'm being totally frank and honest. We don't have to have that, litigate that matter anymore. It's a little less time intensive. Every dedication, every lease back, we have to bring it before the Board of County Commissioners, and approval, maintenance, all of that, those will go away. And again, assuming that people are gonna, like Bob said, they have to remain in conformance with all the requirements for their project, special use permit, whatever. Assuming they'll do all the right things, we don't have to be in the business of managing all these water rights anymore. There was a time when we were a water utility, we managed thousands upon thousands of water rights permits, municipal, for all of our various water systems. That's not the case anymore. We have very limited staff, very limited resources. I see this as an evolution. I see this as people recognize the importance of water rights, their monetary value, their significance. And I think the business owners, these commercial industrial business owners, they have to manage a lot of other things. Why not their own water rights? I guess that's the benefit. We don't have to be in the middle of this management scheme anymore. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, that answers my question very well. I have some concerns, but I'll wait for discussion when we get to there. Thank you.
Okay.
If I may, but where is the checks and balances?
The checks and balances come from, first of all, they have to have in the approval, early in the approval process, they have to have adequate water rights.
I'm sorry, let me, the checks and balances, if they want to, if somebody is requesting to have their water rights given
deed
back
it
to
back.
them, and then where's the check and balance to make sure that it doesn't put a project out of compliance?
So long as the water rights remain on the well, the place of use is in, matches the project, they are in conformance. Whether we own title, whether Washoe County is the title holder or the project owner, That's not where the conformance lies. The conformance lies where how the water rights is. If it's on the appropriate well with the appropriate manner of use and appropriate place of use, they're in conformance.
Okay. Commissioner Haran, you look like you have a question.
Well, it sounds like it's a bookkeeping system.
It is. It's very much a book.
And with Michael, Mr. the commissioner's question about what the risk and so forth, who controls this bookkeeping system? Where is the control point? I mean, it sounds like that's what we're the risk reward here and the risk, the pluses and the minus. I mean, where is that bookkeeping? Who's in charge of that?
Well, broadly, State Engineer's Office manages all the water rights in all of state of Nevada. With these smaller projects, we were the link between these small projects and the State Engineer's Office. If upfront within the approval of the project, adequate water rights are in place, then the state engineer is aware of it, we are aware of it, and we can monitor it. The state engineer can, if there are any proposed changes to this notification process, they'll notify Washoe County. This permit is being moved to another well location. Well, we'll review it. If it's not in conformance with the project, we will step in and say, if you do this, you're going to lose your special use permit, or you're going to lose your business license. So there is a process in place by this notification where we can intervene and hopefully stop.
Who is the we when you're referring to?
Washoe County.
The county is going to
Yes.
going to be in control. We're the bookkeeper.
If I might, I think that what he's describing is less a bookkeeper at this point, more an auditor. And so we are currently the bookkeeper. We're now turning the books over between the state engineer and whoever is holding title. We become the auditor. And it's our job to audit and monitor and step in as need be based on our regulatory obligations spelled out in Article 422 to ensure that the adequate number of water rights that are supposed to be with whatever it is remain with it.
Okay, that's clear. Do we have the staff to do that?
You're looking at him. There is not a lot of projects that fall into this particular category. I should have said that earlier. This is not like subdivisions. There is not a whole lot of these, and they are generally fall into the category of some equestrian center, a dog kennel, some kind of a commercial project that needs a special use permit from Washoe County. There's not very many of them.
And if I might, during the reorganization of when the Department of Water Resources went away, we had obviously a water side of the house and a sewer side of the house. Sewer side of the house is still hanging around. Fahid is the last of the water people to remain in Community Services Department specifically for these functionalities that he performs. That was a conscious choice by the department to remain one staff position. That's what they dedicate, and that's what they do as a part of community services.
Not the only thing I do, but one of the things I do.
But you do all things water. Other questions from commissioners? Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
There are a few more slides
Oh,
that
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Mullen was going to go over.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll make this quick. There's just a few procedural items. So as we do with all development code amendments, we did hold a public workshop to let folks know in the public about what was being proposed, the specific language changes, give them an opportunity to attend, to learn more about that the proposed amendment, ask questions, et cetera. We did send out notification to members of the public, those who are subscribed to the county's CMail system, as well as to all Citizen Advisory Board members. We had 2 attendees who did come. We have received no comment from the public regarding this proposed amendment. We did provide notice in the Reno Gazette Journal in accordance with our code requirements for this hearing tonight. And then there are four, as you're aware, there are four findings that do need to be made in order to approve or recommend approval of a development code amendment as outlined in the staff report. Staff does believe that all of these findings can be met. That includes that it is consistent with the master plan, promotes the purpose of the development code, does respond to change conditions as indicated earlier in the presentation, and then again also has no adverse effects. So staff is recommending approval of this amendment, and we request that you recommend approval, pass it up to the Board of County Commissioners, and also sign that resolution that you'll see in Attachment A. We do have a suggested motion on the screen for you if you agree with staff's recommendation, and if you have any additional questions, we're happy to address those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do now. Linda Harrison.
So you'll come forward and state your name and address clearly into the microphone.
Linda Harrison, 395 U.S. Highway 395 North, Washoe Valley, Nevada. I just have one question. If you're it's for him, but if somebody a long time ago started a project and they had to dedicate the water rights for 99 years and they're no longer in existence, and then you're going to give the water rights back, then can they sell them? Or I was just curious, because that was a long time ago.
Sure.
Okay.
The 99-year lease document and the whole process has a clause in it. If the project ceases to exist, whether it's commercial, industrial, the 99-year lease is void and we reconvey the water rights back to the rightful owner. This is all geared towards impact on water resources. If there is no water demand, there is no mandate for dedication and this whole process. Does that answer your question?
Little unorthodox there, but do we have any other public comment?
No further public comment.
Okay. Do we have any further questions from commissioners? If not, I will close the public comment and bring it back to the board. Call for motions.
Madam Chair, I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission recommend approval of WDCA 17-0002 to amend the Washoe County Code, Chapter 110, within Article 422, Water and Sewer Resource Requirements, as required in Attachment A. I further move to authorize the chair to sign the resolution contained in Attachment A on behalf of the Planning Commission and to direct the staff to present a report of this commission's recommendation to the Washoe County Board of Commissioners within 60 days of today's date. This recommendation for approval is based on all the following findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code, Section 110.818.15E.
Is there a second?
I second, Madam Chair.
Any discussion on this motion?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Haran.
I'll support the motion, but it's a little confusing, and I would not be surprised that we will find out later there might be an unintended consequence.
Any other comments? All those.
And Madam Chair, that motion was by Commissioner Chesney.
Oh, I'm sorry,
and the
Commissioner
second
Chesney
was
and seconded by
Donchik.
Commissioner Donchak, yes. I even wrote their names down. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And as per the amended agenda, we are now on to 9C. So if we'll call the staff identify the agenda item.
With pleasure. Development Code Amendment Case Number WDCA 17-0005, Administrative Permits for possible action, hearing, and discussion to initiate an amendment to Chapter 110 of Washoe County Code within Article 808, Section 110.808.40B, to increase the number of days from acceptance of a complete application for an administrative permit to the public hearing on the application from 50 to 65. If the proposed amendment is initiated, public hearing and further possible action to deny or recommend approval of the proposed amendment, and if approval is recommended, to authorize the chair to sign a resolution to that effect. The staff planner is Mr. Roger Pelham.
Thank you. Disclosures, are there any disclosures by commissioners, either ethics or ex parte communications? Okay, thank you. I'm opening the public hearing for this item and staff presentation.
Good evening. Pardon me. Good evening, Madam
Speak
Chairman, members
into the microphone.
Is this better?
That's better.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, Roger Pelham with Washoe County Planning. This is a very simple development code amendment which in effect changes one number. The description is to increase the number of days for processing of an administrative permit. Right now, code requires that those go to hearing within 50 days, and we are seeking to change that to 65 days.
You
I
broke
think I
it.
did this last time, too.
Okay.
There we go. So, Washoe County Code Section 110.808.40B requires that administrative permits go to public hearing within 50 days. Nevada Revised Statutes, on the other hand, allows 65 days for that type of application to be evaluated. Other similar types of applications, such as variances and special use permits, by the way, administrative permits are essentially the same as a special use permit. The findings are the same. They are intended to sort of be, however, sort of a lesser level of review, special use permit being greater, the administrative permit being lesser. But both of those are allowed 65 days. The difference creates confusion. What we've had to do in the past is have one application date for administrative permits and a different application date for all other applications. What we're hoping to do is, by making them consistent, we have one application date, we eliminate some confusion, we make it a little bit easier on the public as a interface with the county. So, approval of the current amendment request would provide consistency between our code and Nevada Revised Statutes. The proposed amendment, again, is very simple and really consists of adding one number and striking through another. Again, adding 65 and striking through 50. This hearing was publicly noticed as required. We also held an open house, a public workshop. No one attended. There are a number of findings required. These are identical to the ones that you have considered in the previous, in your previous application. This is, we believe, consistent with the master plan. There are quite frankly, no actions or programs, policies that are pertinent to the time for processing. This does promote the purpose of the development code. We think among other things, this helps to create consistency for the public and for staff. There are no particular external changes that we're responding to. We are simply responding to the to be consistent with Nevada Revised Statutes. And we don't believe that there will be any adverse effects created. So, following the exact same procedure as the previous item, I would like to recommend that the Planning Commission initiate this amendment, subsequently recommend approval, and authorize the chair to sign the attached resolution. Again, this is a pretty simple change. It's changing one number. I don't know how much further I can go on. If you have any questions, I'm here to address any you might have.
But for clarification, we are initiating the amendment and then recommending the approval. So
That is correct.
just so all commissioners are clear on that. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
Do we have questions from Commissioners for staff?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chesney. As well, with these administrative permits, they're supposed to be simpler and faster, and you're asking for more time to process them. If anything, it would be my recommendation that you cut the time on them to 30 days. As we would have found out in the previous item, 9B, the recommendation is to go to, for public and outdoor entertainment, to the administrative process in a lot of areas. So there is no way that I can support additional time for administrative permits, because they're supposed to be the fastest way through the system.
And if I might, for Commissioner Chesney, Mr. Pelham didn't say that the administrative permit process was supposed to be faster. What he just said, it's a different process. What actually happens with administrative permits, there's two processes you can go through that you have to determine as an applicant which one you want to follow. One half of that process is you can actually have an administrative process that's reviewed and approved by the director. That requires a notice of all the adjacent property owners and written consent from each of those property owners that they agree to whatever you want to do in the administrative permit. If you do that, then that is truly an administrative process that goes to an internal procedure of the director for approval. However, if you cannot obtain the written consent, you are forced to go to the Board of Adjustment. What happens in that is now you're being pushed into the Board of Adjustment application cycle, and because you have to make your decision earlier, the review time on that permit now has been severely shortened for those reviewing agencies. When you have the one that's being done by the property owner consent, while you're doing that, the reviewing agencies are taking a look at it. However, when you decide to jump into the Board of Adjustment schedule, now what you're doing is fitting this administrative permit into the normal cycle process that any other permit, a discretionary permit heard by the Board of Adjustment, goes through. So by itself, the administrative permit itself is not meant to be faster. It depends on which choice you go down, which path. If you're able to get written property owner consent, yes, it will be faster, simply because you don't have to ultimately end up with a public hearing. You still got to have the time period in there for review by agencies. You still have to have the conditions placed on that permit and ultimately approved by the director. If, however, you're in that other path, it's not going any faster. It just means now you have to put an additional public hearing onto it. And for the previous item, item 9B, there's a difference for that administrative process. That's not an administrative permit. That's an administrative process, which is entirely different. It's, again, not that we're not talking about the same thing. It's an administrative permit, which is different. Hopefully that clarifies it a little bit.
That's just clear as a bell, Bob. Thank you.
Other questions from commissioners? Now I'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board for a motion and consideration.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Donchek.
on initiation, I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report, the Washoe County Planning Commission initiate the amendment of Washoe County Code, Chapter 110, Article 808, Administrative Permits as described in the staff report, WDCA 17-0005. Now, Bob, do we vote on this first, and then we go to the second part, or can we do it all at once?
You can do them both at the same time, or you can do them individually. This is whatever the chair would prefer. Doing them both at the same time kills two birds with one stone, as the saying goes.
Madam Chair, amendment. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, Washoe County Planning Commission recommend approval of the Development Code case number WDCA 17-0005 to amend Washoe County Chapter 110 Development Code, Article 808, Section 808-.40B to increase the number of days from acceptance from a complete application for an administrative permit to the public hearing on the application from 50 to 65 days. I further move to authorize the chair to sign the resolution contained in Attachment A on behalf of the Washoe County Planning Commission, and to direct staff to present a report of this commission's recommendation to the Washoe County Board of Commissioners within 60 days of today's date. This recommendation for approval is based on all of the following 4 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.818.15E.
Second.
To both.
To both.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded by moved by Commissioner Donchak and seconded by Commissioner Haran. Any other discussion before we take action?
Well, I think that regardless of whether we think it should be faster or slower or whatever, I think that the fact that we are going to be in conformance with the NRS is an important move, and that I will certainly support it.
Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is item 9B. Identify the general nature of the proceedings, Mr. Webb.
With pleasure. Development Code Amendment Case Number WDCA 17-0003, Outdoor Entertainment, for possible action, hearing, and discussion to initiate an amendment to Washoe County Code Chapter 110 within Article 302 to establish the regulatory zones wherein the outdoor entertainment commercial use type is permitted by right or by discretionary action, and Article 226, Section 110, 226, 18, equestrian uses, to subject certain activities occurring under the equestrian facilities use type to the outdoor entertainment regulations, and to create a new article, Article 338, outdoor entertainment, for establishing the processes, regulations, and standards specifically to establishing both temporary and permanent outdoor entertainment. The proposed Article 338, outdoor entertainment, expands the definition of outdoor entertainment to include both facilities and events for the assembly of 75 or more people for any purpose in any outdoor location, identifies a wider range of typical outdoor entertainment activities, establishes an administrative review and approval process for activities with an attendance between 75 and 999 people on any one day, and a public hearing review and approval process for activities within 1,000 or more people in attendance on any one day, provides for both temporary and permanent activities, provides for certain exemptions for establishing the use type on federal land. The amendment also makes necessary changes to Article 304 to amend the description of outdoor entertainment use type to consistent with the new description found in the proposed Article 338, and Article 310, temporary uses, to establish the criteria for determining when a temporary outdoor entertainment use type requires a permit. If the proposed amendment is initiated, public hearing and further possible action to deny or recommend approval of the proposed amendment, and if approval is recommended, to authorize the chair to sign the resolution to that effect. The staff planner is Mr. Eric Young.
Thank you. Disclosures by commissioners on either ethics or ex parte communications?
I don't know whether I need to acknowledge that I'm a member of the Incline Village General Improvement District, and we do apply for these things for outdoor entertainment at their ski resorts and so forth, but I don't think that I'm involved very much with that. And it won't affect my looking at it.
Yeah, we have this issue come up over and over again, not just here, but with all of the boards and things in the county, especially the higher up you go. You know, the county commissioners are members of various different boards, lots of them, in fact. That alone, I think pretty consistently the courts have decided that that's not a disqualifying interest. If for some reason you had some personal stake or financial stake in it, or it was going to impair your ability to be objective, then it might be a different story. But what I have heard you say so far doesn't trigger any of those, so I think you're okay not to recuse.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other disclosures?
Yes, I attended the Warm Springs CAB meeting on this. I did not participate in the CAB, just observed.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'll open it up for the public hearing. Staff presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Eric Young from the Planning and Building Division. Last agenda item, Roger gave you an example of a simple development code amendment, and now we get to look at this one.
Which is less simple.
Yeah, let's start with the what and why are we here, because I don't think you're you're familiar with the original initiation of this. The Board of County Commissioners originally initiated this Development Code Amendment almost a year ago, November 29th of last year. Here's the specific subject that went along with that staff report and initiation. Essentially what it says is it directed staff to develop proposals that expand the definition of outdoor entertainment as well as the range of regulatory zones where that use can be established, and to essentially determine the need and appropriate level of discretionary approval. So what would that actually look like if we were to pursue that initiation? It's a group of amendments to the Development Code that, taken together, address a series of ongoing issues with the way in which Washoe County defines, reviews, and permits outdoor entertainment events and facilities. So it's not just one amendment, it's a series of amendments. These multiple amendments include the land use tables found in Article 302, the definition of outdoor entertainment found in Article 304, the description of outdoor entertainment as a temporary use in Article 310, and the Warm Spring modifiers in Article 226. Additionally, the County Commission will be asked to consider parallel changes to Washoe County Code Chapter 25, business licenses, in order to consolidate the review and approval of most outdoor entertainment events and venues into Chapter 110, the Development Code. So just like Vahid mentioned on his Development Code amendment regarding water rights, some background and context would probably be pretty beneficial as we move forward here. So in order to understand the changes that are being proposed, we're going to have a quick look at how Washoe County looks at outdoor entertainment currently. So Washoe County Code Chapter 110, Article 304, the use classification system, provides a definition of outdoor entertainment. It lists this definition under one of 10 separate commercial use types found under the umbrella referred to as commercial recreation. There are 10 of these different activities, outdoor entertainment being one of them. Each of them is allowed in a different set of regulatory zones. So the 10 uses, real quickly: campground facilities and RV parks, destination resorts, indoor entertainment, indoor sports and recreation, limited gaming facility, marinas, outdoor entertainment, the subject of tonight's amendments, outdoor sports and recreation, outdoor sports club, and unlimited gaming facility. So those are all listed, and they're all provided with their own definition. The definition that this section of code provides for outdoor entertainment is as follows. Outdoor entertainment refers to predominantly spectator-type uses conducted in open or partially enclosed or screened facilities. Typical uses include sports arenas, racing facilities, and amusement parks. Throughout the Development Code, not only for these uses, but in all the definitions listed under 304, the list of typical uses is really important to staff in the implementation of these because it gives us a sense of what we're talking about. You can give a definition and you go, okay, well, is that included or not? It gives a couple of examples of what you're talking about. So if somebody comes in with something that's not listed, you can see, try and match the most common, most overlapping example. So these lists of typical uses, they're not intended to be comprehensive and include every possible thing. They're intended to give you a sense of what that use is about and help you put uses that may come forward in the future into one of those definitions. So this list of typical uses is important, and as you probably noticed in the original initiation, it's allowing us to, it's asking us to expand this list of typical uses to include several more things, including concerts, outdoor plays, music, live or recorded, and so on. It suggests some additions to that typical use. So one of the things that often happens, and this is an example of why these typical uses and definitions are important, is this outdoor entertainment uses can be confused with other uses. The outdoor sports and recreation and outdoor sports club are two of the common use types that it gets confused with, and people come into the front counter, they come in with a plan, and they think they may be one, and then we sit down and we look at these and say, well, here's the one, you described what you just wanted to do, that falls best under this particular use, and sometimes it's one of the three. And so, once again, these lists of typical uses really help us get people in the right use type. So, outdoor entertainment, like a lot of uses in the development code, can be permitted either as a permanent use or it can be permitted as a temporary use. As a permanent use, in order to establish the outdoor entertainment use type, a special use permit from the Board of Adjustment is required in all circumstances. All circumstances are currently limited to 3 regulatory zones. You can only establish outdoor entertainment as a permanent use in either tourist, commercial, industrial, or parks and recreation. And you are required to get that special use permit from the Board of Adjustment. As a temporary use, things start to get a little bit more complicated and a little bit more complex, so bear with me as we go through this. And you may begin to recognize some of the benefits of making some amendments as we recognize the complexity of the way we currently do it. So, Article 310, temporary uses, provides regulations that help you establish this as a temporary use. As a temporary use, it can be established in any regulatory zone. There are no limits to the regulatory zones where it can be approved. It also establishes time limits, usually 14 days total, and the type of approval that is necessary going forward. It establishes some thresholds for the type of approval that you would get for temporary use. These temporary events, though, as we hinted at earlier, are not only regulated through the Development Code Chapter 110. There's an entire section in Chapter 25, business licenses, that provides regulations for temporary uses that are outdoor entertainment. So we've got these 2 chapters of code that intersect with each other and attempt to regulate outdoor entertainment jointly. And so staff is required to understand both codes and to understand the thresholds in each code and when you have to go over to the other code and begin to follow those processes. So really understanding how these 2 codes and establish the thresholds and how they can overlap begins to be pretty complex. In general, all outdoor entertainment requires a business license. You have to get a business license. But depending on attendance levels, the permitting and licensing requirements may change. What you have to go through in order to get your license will change based on attendance levels. So currently, there are 4 business license or permitting tiers for temporary outdoor entertainment. The first of these tiers is just what's called a special event, and it's 99 people or less, basically less than 100 people. Some examples are small equestrian events you just want to do on a weekend. It's not your business, but you have a stable and you want to do a small event. We see those from time to time. Fundraisers from time to time in a parking lot or somewhere. We see those from time to time. They don't expect a whole lot of people, but it's going to be public invited. Some small flea markets we see from time to time that people want to do on a temporary basis, throw one together. Don't expect a lot of people every day, less than 100 people on a daily basis. And one that we might be most familiar with is the Sun Valley GID movie in the park or movie in the pool. I can't quite remember what they call it, but it's a big event for the community that the Sun Valley GID applies for. for this special event. So those are some examples of events that fall under this less than 99, less than 100 people. We call it a special event. The review process for that is simply that business license staff approves and issues the permit, the license, after determining the appropriate review agencies and requiring the applicant to go get sign-off. Essentially what happens is they come in with their application, business license staff gives them a sign-off sheet and checks the boxes of all the different review agencies they have to go see. Fire, health, building, engineering, whichever ones are appropriate based on business license staff experience with those types of events. So they will choose the appropriate review agencies and send the applicant out to get a check off. When they get the check off, they come back in and the license is issued. The second tier of approval and review is called an outdoor community event. There's really only one outdoor community event, but we have divided into this intersection of the business license code and the development code creates two tiers in this middle event. So an outdoor community event is really 100 to 999 people. But the way our two codes intersect and create thresholds, there's a smaller one, outdoor community event A, we'll call it, although our codes don't call it A, but it's 100 to 299 people. Those are some farmers markets, some medium equestrian events. There was just one that went through recently that was for a type of educational summer camp. They weren't able to actually, they were approved, they weren't able to actually follow through. But that's the example of some of these smaller outdoor community events that we see come through the office. So how are those reviewed and approved? On those, we begin to do a little bit more of an expansive review. Planning staff, not business license staff, but at that point, planning staff determines the appropriate review agencies and distributes the application with all the necessary information to the reviewing agencies. Then planning staff will produce a staff report for consideration by the Director of Community Development. The Director determines approval with conditions, or denial after review of the staff report that includes all of the agency's conditions of approval or reasons for denial. So this is a process wherein the planner distributes the application for agency review, consolidates those comments into a staff report, and the decision is then made by the Director of Community Development. So the second tier, what we'll call outdoor community event B, just takes it on up for the rest of that, 300 to 299 people. Some examples of that event are the Classical Tahoe event and the Incline Village Art Festival. Those are a couple of things that are in this persons per day tier level. And so what are they currently required to do? Well, they have to get a business license and an administrative permit. It works the same way as the process just described, wherein the planner determines the appropriate review agencies, consolidates the responses, produces a staff report. However, in addition to what we did for the last one, A, we also have a public hearing before the Board of Adjustment, which requires notice of everybody within 500 feet, newspaper notice, notice of cabs. There's a whole public notice process that's a little beyond that 100 to 299 group that we bring it up to for the 300 to 999 group. This describes that outdoor event. So community event B. This is, like I said, this has to go to the Board of Adjustment for a public hearing rather than just the director. So there's the difference here. One goes to the director, one goes to a public hearing and is determined by the board. So the fourth tier, the last tier, is called an outdoor festival. It's 1,000 people or more. And some examples are Red, White, and Tahoe Blue, and the Reno Tahoe Open Foundation Golf Tournament, what's currently called the Barracuda Golf Championship. Those are current examples of the outdoor festival application that we often see. The review process for outdoor festivals requires an administrative permit granted by the Board of County Commissioners. So it's the same process. Staff gathers the application, distributes for agency review, consolidates the comments, develops a staff report and a recommendation, but instead of going to the Board of Adjustment, it goes to the County Commission. And that happens as soon as your anticipated level of participation is 1,000 people on any given day. So what are these different levels of review? What do they really come down to? They're very similar for all four of the licensing permitting requirements. The differences really concern who provides the final approval and the level of public notice. Those are the major differences between the four. Comments from appropriate review agencies are obtained in all instances. So those are how the current four levels of review play out on a daily basis here in the office when we get these various different applications. One of the things people are often very interested in is the specific public notice requirements, and when does public notice become required? So currently, the public notice requirements that we have in Article 808 administrative permits are utilized. For community events and outdoor festivals, they require notice of property owners 500 feet or more. Community events of 300 plus and outdoor festivals also require that publication and notice in the paper. So we're not getting to public notice until we get to the 100 or more people. But there is that 500-foot notice in most instances of all of these different permit requirements. All three except the fourth one, special events, the small one doesn't require that public notice, but the other three do. So to summarize this current process, outdoor entertainment is regulated across different chapters of county code. The use type is restricted to 3 regulatory zones for permanent use. There are currently 4 separate levels of review for temporary outdoor entertainment uses. And the intersection of Chapter 25 business licenses and Chapter 110 development code creates complexities that can be difficult to administer. So what was staff's approach to identifying and consolidating all the necessary amendments that would be necessary to approach the original initiation? What we decided to do after a variety of drafts was to consolidate most necessary new language into a new article, Article 338, designed specifically for outdoor entertainment. This is similar to the approach used in Article 324 for wireless communications facilities. When you're going through, if you're familiar, I'm sure you've looked at the tables. When you're going through our land use tables, you go down the column and find the use, and then you go over and look at all the different regulatory zones that it's allowed in. For wireless communications facilities, it just says refer to Article 324. So that's our proposal for outdoor entertainment, is to, instead of identifying specific regulatory zones there, refer everybody to Article 338 to see how it works. Then our next task was, to identify all the different sections of code that intersect with this new article and make the necessary changes to support and be consistent with the new article. That means you have to go back and look at 302 allowed uses, 304 use classification system, 226 Warm Springs, and Chapter 25 business licenses. We read through the entire development code, we did searches, we looked around for everything we could find to try and make sure that we weren't leaving some spot that is impacted by this that is going to end up being inconsistent because we didn't make an appropriate amendment. We believe we found them all in these particular articles. And so our approach is to amend those articles together with the creation of this new article. So my approach to these tasks, to these projects, is always to establish either a set of principles or a set of goals, and then stick as close to that as possible as you move forward. If you don't do that with these big, complex amendments, you can get thrown off track. It's easy enough to get thrown off track when you do stick to your principles and your goals. So it's important to do that. So we established some goals that we think are based on that original Board of County Commissioners initiation. And these are the goals that we established and attempted to make sure that we addressed as we went forward. Broaden the definition of outdoor entertainment to include more typical uses. Expand the range of regulatory zones where outdoor entertainment can be established as a permanent use. Reduce the number of tiers of review. Detangle Chapter 25 business licenses and Chapter 110 development code. Establish a process whereby events currently permitted annually as temporary events can be permitted on a permanent basis without impacting the necessary level of review. And activities such as equestrian events can be given a home, so to speak, in the development code. Equestrian events right now is an example of a use type that we think is in the development code, we think has a definition, because equestrian uses, Washoe County, of course we address that. Well, we don't. Equestrian uses is not defined. The only place it's found is in the Warm Springs modifiers, where they actually do have a discussion of equestrian uses and equestrian facilities. But nowhere else in the code is it defined or discussed. And so I don't want to call it an orphan use, but it's a use that we've had to try and find what fits it best, and we're not convinced that we have found the best place for it. So this process, these proposed amendments, may be able to give uses like that an appropriate place in the code. So let's look at how we addressed each of these. Goal 1, what do we do to broaden the definition of outdoor entertainment to include more typical uses? The proposed definition and the current definition are provided here. You can see that we have reached out to include things like arenas and amphitheaters. We've specifically mentioned music, live or recorded, theater, sports, including golf tournaments, to make sure that we capture what occurs here in Washoe County. And we specifically mentioned equestrian and other animal events. So you can see that this new proposed definition is somewhat more expansive than the current definition. Temporary uses, and Article 310 temporary uses also requires some amendment for consistency. But really what I'm showing you here is just that we did make that change to be consistent with the new definition. So go 2, what did we do to expand the range of regulatory zones where outdoor entertainment can be established as a permanent use? So regulatory zones proposed for permanent use: general rural agricultural, low-density rural, medium-density rural, high-density rural, low-density suburban, neighborhood commercial, general commercial, tourist commercial, industrial, and parks and recreation. And you'll notice that those last 3, tourist commercial, industrial, and parks and recreation, are the only ones where it's currently allowed. So the expansion are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 regulatory zones listed prior to those last 3 that we are proposing this to be available as a permanent use. So how did we choose those? How did we come up with that? We had to have some sort of a rationale for that. So the additional regulatory zones expand to include all the commercial zones. Instead of just tourist commercial, we've said, okay, for outdoor entertainment, let's look at general commercial and neighborhood commercial for for the range of different possible events. We expanded the definition to include a pretty broad range of things that may be appropriate for those two commercial zones. The expanded availability in the rural residential type zones is based on where commercial stables are currently permitted. And right now, commercial stables is the use type under which we process equestrian events. So that's where we found a home. Unfortunately, and I may mention this later, that when you read the definition of commercial stables, it does not anticipate what people really want to do when they say equestrian events. And so we've been going with that because it's the closest we've got, but even though it's the closest we've got, it's not really very close to what people are actually doing. So, goal 3, how did we reduce the number of tiers of review? Well, we're going from 4 to 3. It's not a huge change, but it is a reduction, and we believe that it's also a reduction in the types of processes here that people have to keep in mind and be aware of. So we are going with special event as it currently is, except we've changed the threshold. Now it's, instead of 99 or less, it's 74 or less. Minor outdoor entertainment permit, 75 to 999. That essentially encompasses that what we're currently calling the community outdoor event. That's the 100 to 999. Currently, that has the 2 tiers, the A and the B. Then we have the third, the major outdoor entertainment event, which is the 1,000 or more. So the terminology is changing, a minor permit and a major permit, to cover the 2 of the larger expected events. So how will special events work? Same way as they work now, except that the threshold is changing. What's a minor outdoor entertainment permit? 75 to 999. This is where I'd like you to start focusing in on these thresholds. A minor outdoor entertainment permit would be a facility or an event expecting 75 to 999 persons on any given day. These would be approved with a director approval or denial following an administrative process that we have modeled on the detached accessory dwelling administrative review process. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, other than maybe remembering when you approved it a few years ago. We were looking for a way to facilitate an easier ability to get a mother-in-law quarters, and so we created an administrative process where for most regulatory zones, you can get this extra dwelling without having to go to a public hearing. We modeled this process on that for a couple of reasons. Our experience is that it's working really well. We don't have complaints about it. Applicants seem to like it, and neighbors who are commenting seem to feel like their comments are being heard and included. So that's one reason for modeling on that. A second reason for modeling on that is an overarching goal, long-term goal of the division is to make sure that our development code gets less complicated and not more complicated. I think you recognize that over time, the amendments, other amendments we brought up tonight. We could have created a new administrative process just for this. Said, okay, for outdoor entertainment, this is what you do. For accessory dwelling, this is what you do. For all these other, and we're hesitant to end up with a separate process for all of these things that may be appropriate to review administratively. So we're trying to limit the number of different types of administrative review and get it down to where if it's appropriate to review it administratively, here's the process regardless. So We didn't want to create a new process. We wanted to go with one that we feel is working for us. That process is, as we described before, all property owners with 500 feet get noticed, homeowner associations, cabs. It's spelled out in the development code, everybody that needs to get noticed. We do have a minimum of 10 property owners. Sometimes for really large property, you notice everybody's 500 feet and you get 3 or 4 because, you know, the property is so huge, you're not getting that many. So we have a minimum of 10. And we do, of course, have full agency review and staff report for these. So the last of the proposed processes is the major outdoor entertainment permit, and that's 1,000 or more. Board of County Commissioners, public hearing in order to approve or deny. And that's going to follow the special use permit process found in 810, which is extremely similar to the administrative permit process. Same type of review, agency review, staff report, approval or denial by the county commission, and the public notice is what you're familiar with, 500 feet, cabs, homeowners, and military installations and so forth. So where'd these thresholds come from? That's been a question that I've had from a lot of the people that have reviewed this and have had a look at it. You know, how are you choosing these numbers? Well, the drop from 100 persons to 75 persons for special events was intended to try and capture some of the smaller equestrian events that we're starting to see coming now. Equestrian events are really popular, and we're starting to see some more applications for them. Our experience is that they do have the potential to be somewhat impactful to the local community. And so we wanted to make sure that we're capturing them by lowering this threshold to 75. There is the danger in that of requiring events that are not that impactful, like maybe the Sun Valley GID pool party, to have to go through a more extensive review than they may really need to go through. So it's trying to find that balance. The next threshold, putting everything from 75 to 999 for the minor permit to be reviewed by the director, that's what we expect the majority of events to fall into. The majority of applications we would expect would fall into this. And the specific intent of that was to facilitate the ability of landowners to pursue these opportunities. We're here in request, we want to do these things. You know, Washoe County, Reno and Sparks let us do these. Washoe County, it's difficult. How do we do this? So we hear this over time, over the years, and so part of the intent of this is to facilitate an easier permitting process for people who want to do these things. And so essentially what's happened here, I'm sure you've noticed this, is that those 2 outdoor community events, A and B, have been consolidated now into one administrative process. There's no longer a public hearing required from that 300 to 999. That's gone. There's one tier, and it's all administrative. The 1,000 or more individuals, why do we stop at 999? If the idea here is to try and make it easier, why stop at 999? The 1,000 or more persons threshold is intended to help us be consistent with Nevada revised statutes, which requires certain activities that draw 1,000 or more persons on any given day be approved by the Board of County Commissioners. It's more limited than what we're requiring here, but once again, if we separate out what statute requires, then we're just creating another tier, another purpose. So we have created this 3-tier system, establishing 1,000 as the number because it it completely covers this Nevada revised statute requirement for Board of County Commissioners approval of certain events. So the last, or goal 4, not second to last goal, detangling Chapter 25 and Chapter 110, how are we going to do that? Well, I'm currently working on some parallel amendments to Chapter 25 that will go to the County Commission. They don't come here because it's not your code. But they'll go to the County Commissioners concurrently with any amendments that you would recommend approval of it. If you move this forward, if you choose to move this forward, then the County Commission at the same meeting will have these Chapter 25 amendments to consider as well. So a business license will always be required for anybody doing business, whether you're the property owner doing business or whether you were a concession at the business or somebody coming to be there. You have to have a business license. But what these amendments to Chapter 25 will do is basically divest Chapter 25 of all permitting regulations for outdoor entertainment events for more than 74 people. So if you're 75 or more people, the processes and specific regulations won't be found in Chapter 25 anymore. They'll only be in Chapter 110. So we hope that will be helpful and a little less complex to administer and understand. Goal 5, the last 5, was to establish a process whereby events currently permitted annually as temporary events can be permitted on a permanent basis without impacting the necessary level of review. And activities such as equestrian events, as we mentioned, can be given this home. So how are we going to go about that? The proposal is that the expanded definition, the expanded range of regulatory zones, and the consolidation of the process in the development code will permit events such as Red, White, and Tahoe Blue, the Barracuda Golf Championship, and Classical Tahoe to apply for a permanent permit that includes ongoing pre, during, and post-event conditions imposed and implemented. So the change would be, instead of Red, White, and Tahoe Blue, for instance, coming back every year for a new license and going before the County Commission every year, with somewhat have almost become boilerplate conditions because we're familiar with them now. They come in and they get a permanent permit with those conditions, and those conditions, the way they work is reviewing agencies say, you've got to tell us when you're going to do an event. You've got to tell us 2 weeks before the event starts. You've got to tell us a week. Every different reviewing agency will have its conditions in order to come out and do the proper inspections, the proper reviews for pre-event, to come out during the event to make sure that things are happening. So all of that agency involvement, all of those conditions of approval that would happen on an annual basis over and over again will still be established and will still happen every year, but that public hearing process before the County Commission won't have to happen year after year. So a note on equestrian events. So as we mentioned, equestrian events are currently viewed and permitted via the commercial stables use type. But that definition for commercial stables doesn't really anticipate the full range of equestrian-oriented activities that people want to do. When people come in and ask for a special use permit for commercial stables, rarely is it just a stable. It includes events on the weekend, events throughout the year, competitions, other shows, other things that happen that invite the public in. And we don't have a definition for that. As I mentioned, only Article 226, the Warm Springs modifiers, mentions equestrian events and equestrian facilities and establishes a process for doing that. And nowhere else in our code is that found. So the proposed amendments would capture those uses and provide a consistent, predictable process based on code that can quickly be found without going to different chapters. A planner can explain it to an applicant much more readily and easily. It also makes some changes to the Warm Springs modifiers in order to ensure that there's consistency with the new article. It makes a couple of changes to their proposed process. So those are the amendments that we're making to try and address the 5 goals that we established. But as you can imagine, there's a whole lot of other amendments that have to be made that you may be curious about. They are in there. We have sections to discuss exemptions. We have sections to discuss appeals procedures, application contents, suspension and revocation, grounds for denial, and importantly, to fully describe that administrative process for the minor event. So those amendments are all included as well. So after we established those goals and started to work on it and eventually got to where we got, what was the process that we established? How did we go about getting to this draft? We conducted some extensive research, not around the state or around the country, but locally. We felt that was what was relevant to us, was how the cities of Reno and the cities of Sparks go about permitting their outdoor entertainment events and venues. We met with representatives of the outdoor entertainment industry, try and figure out what their current needs, future needs, and experiences have been with Washoe County. We conducted the all-cab meeting that you heard about for the 2 previous development code amendments that we do for all development code amendments. And in addition to that all-cab meeting, we also went to the South Truckee Meadows Washoe Valley Cab and to the Warm Springs Citizens Advisory Board, to the Warm Springs Cab as well. We went to those 2 cabs specifically. The South Truckee Meadows Washoe Valley Cab, that's where the Barracuda Golf Championship is. That's where a lot of the requests for equestrian events come from. And so we felt like we would go discuss this with them more specifically. And of course, with the changes to the Warm Springs modifiers, we really had to go to the Warm Springs Cab and let them know that that was coming. We really didn't want to show up here tonight without letting them know that we were making those proposals. They worked really hard on their existing language, and it took some time for them to get there. And so we wanted to make sure that we spoke with them about our proposed amendments to that. So what did we hear when we went out and did this? What was the industry and the public input? So individuals who pursue outdoor entertainment permits in both Reno and Sparks greatly appreciate the speed and consistency of the review process utilized in those jurisdictions. And greatly appreciate is probably an understatement. They are effusive in their praise of the Reno and Sparks processes for obtaining the necessary permits to move forward with outdoor entertainment events. Landowners are also seeking this wider range of regulatory zones where they can establish outdoor entertainment as a permitted use. We heard that the 3 existing regulatory zones are not only too restrictive, but that Washoe County just doesn't have much of those established to begin with out on the ground. You just can't find that much tourist, commercial, industrial, parks, and recreation. It's not there to choose from. So they're also interested in a wider range of regulatory zones. And event promoters are looking for an alternative to the annual temporary permits. The people who do Classical Tahoe are asking about that. The people who do Barracuda are asking about that. Is there some way that we don't have to go through an annual process, but we can still get the annual agency input? So comments from the Citizens Advisory Boards were pretty consistent, all 3. We did have a handful of people show up. In all honesty, these all-cab meetings are not very well attended. I think Roger indicated that for his, nobody showed up. I think for Vahid, he indicated a couple people showed up. We ended up with, I think, 6 people, which is pretty well attended for one of these. And we also, as I mentioned, went to the other 2 cabs. But from all 3 of those meetings, we heard pretty much the same thing. And here's how I'll characterize that. Generally, the public is concerned that the thresholds for administrative process, 75 to 999, are both too high and too low, or too low and too high. They express concern that small events will be burdened with a process they currently don't have to endure, and that bigger projects will not afford them an opportunity to have meaningful input on events and facilities that could change the character of their community. Whether it's a proposal for a large facility near the top of the threshold, like a music theater venue, or a small facility near the bottom of the threshold, an equestrian event or facility, they still would like to have input beyond calling a planner or writing a letter. Public comment also centered on the theme of public meetings and the appreciation that they have for the ability to meet and talk over proposals in their community. An administrative process that does not include at least a CAB meeting, preferably a public hearing, is generally viewed with caution. So the idea of the 75 to 999 range for the middle threshold being administrative in character without a public meeting, there is, of course, CAB notification through the notice process, but there are no public meetings. That's was the major concern that we heard at all of the CAB meetings. And it was couched in a general appreciation for just the ability to get together and talk over things that are happening in their community. So I'll try and summarize this. Thanks for sticking with me. This is a complex development code amendment that reaches across county code chapters. The amendment seeks to consolidate and simplify the county's current approach to permitting and licensing of outdoor entertainment facilities and events. The amendment seeks to establish a balance of speed, predictability, and comprehensive agency review in a manner that is consistent with Washoe County's longstanding commitment to public and community input. That balance, as you can imagine, is really the name of our game. It's what we do on a daily basis with these code amendments, master plan amendments, is seeking that balance. That's what we've attempted to do with this code. Going all the way to a process like Reno and Sparks have would be very inconsistent and out of character with what you might call Washoe County's culture of doing this. It's simply too fast, and there's virtually no public review. I can't point to any problems that Reno or Sparks have with their processes. They seem to be 2 jurisdictions that are at the top of their game for permitting outdoor entertainment events. They both seem to be really good at it, and I don't think we're really hearing about problems that they have with their process. But our ability to adopt something like that, I believe, is very limited because it's so far removed from what we currently do. It would be a giant leap, and it would require a lot of the community to accept that big of a change. So it's seeking that balance between speed and public process that we tried to achieve with this code. Now, I guess I think what Kelly called procedurally in her presentation, we are, with this agenda item tonight, asking you to initiate this amendment, and we're also making a recommendation of approval The county commission's original initiation has expired. They don't last forever, and so reinitiation is required. And of course, once you dig into something like we did after the original initiation, you start to see a lot of other things that have to happen. And so the initiation that we're asking you to do is more comprehensive for what we're proposing. So any motion would have to include an initiation and a motion on the item itself. Of course, that motion should include the 4 findings that are necessary for a development code amendment. I'll reiterate those. Consistency with the master plan that promotes the purpose of the development code, that it's responding to changed conditions, and that there are no adverse effects. So part of your motion would have to be a finding. You would have to make those 4 findings as part of your motion. If you choose to recommend approval and move this on to the county commission, the next step would be a county commission first reading of both these amendments and the Chapter 25 amendments that would be necessary. So with that, I will stop speaking and allow you to get at me with your questions and concerns. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. This was very, very helpful. I've been advised that there may be an applicant presentation. There is not?
There's no applicant for this. It's Washoe County's proposal.
Do we have any public comment on this?
We do. We have Linda Harrison, followed by Douglas R. Studwell Jr.
Good job. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I am Linda Harrison. I live at 395 US Highway 395 North in Washoe Valley. And I realize that this changed is to expand the definition of outdoor entertainment, is to allow event preparers more leeway. I understand as far as the red, white, and blue people and the equestrian and all that, but I totally disagree with the whole thing as far as redefining outdoor entertainment. I think that if you make the rules too broad, there will be abuses. And with words like typical uses and predominantly and especially any regulatory zone, I live right down the street from the new marijuana superstore that went in Washoe Valley. That was supposed to be this nice, cute little outdoor building. I am quite sure they are one of the, and now it's this event center, and I'm quite sure that's one of the places that will be wanting to have outdoor concerts. It is a residential area. I know we have commercial, but it is residential, and it's not just us. There's a lot of other places like that in Washoe County that this would impact, and I think impact badly. And so, oh, I still have more time. So there are other commercial entities out where we are, but nothing like that. And so for our area and for other areas where these events might take place, I ask that these questions: who will be putting in the restrictions and the requirements as far as security and parking? And I see that there's notification of residents, but, and most importantly, time restrictions. And I'm not talking about days, I'm talking about like all the noise stops at 10 o'clock at night. That kind of time thing. I don't like how broad this is. I really think that it will be abused. I truly believe it will be abused, and especially the 75 to 999, which I understand that too, but that's a really big difference when you're talking about the people that would be attending these things. So, yeah, I probably had more to say, but I can't think of it. But I don't, outdoor entertainment is just too broad of a thing. I think this should be broken down. If you want to deal with the equestrian part, make that a separate part. If you want to deal with these people who come every year, make that a separate part. And let's get a whole lot more restrictive and a whole lot more regulation and wording as far as all that other stuff that's going to be too big and too broad. Thank you.
Thank you.
Douglas Sedwell, followed by William Naylor.
Hello, my name's Douglas Studwell, and I live at 315 Sanctuary Way in Washoe Valley. I'm a homeowner in Old Washoe Estates, and there are other homeowners that weren't able to be present, but I've been talking with them, and they kind of agree that this change to the master plan, the South Valley's plan, the historic old Washoe City zoning, it shouldn't be allowed to be just making these changes with a stroke of the pen. We need to have public input on this a lot more. It's key to maintaining the rural settings of Old Washoe City and Washoe Valley, and a lot of the other rural areas in Washoe County, because, you know, we're dealing with a whole county here, and it goes all the way from, you know, a little bit more densely populated in areas like New Washoe City, Old Washoe City, all the way to out that there's nothing but jackrabbits and sage hens. So things need to get a little bit more specific, because like out in Washoe Valley and other places, we're on wells, we're on septic systems. How are we going to handle the traffic, the parking, the law enforcement in these areas? And again, you know, we possibly maybe need to delay this for some little more looking at it and input from the CABs and on the regular approval process. You know, the definition of outdoor entertainment, as the lady just mentioned, it needs to be defined a little bit more in detail versus so general. It makes a big difference in what's being allowed in the rural settings. You know, a case in point, look at the mega marijuana mall that we've got there now going up. If you haven't, take a drive down through Old Washoe City and look at what's being built across from Old Washoe Estates. You know, at first it was the approval of the medical marijuana, and then because of the vote, it went into recreational marijuana. It got grandfathered in, and, you know, it was sort of shoved down our throats. And in the, you know, we're looking at future entertainment, outdoor entertainment. Well, you know, how long is it before they want to change laws for making smoking lounges or outdoor smoking entertainment areas? And because right now, you buy your marijuana, you're supposed to go home with it. You can't do it in a car, in a park, and all the other places. I don't need to belabor it. But that's the thing. This code change is so vague that it could allow these things to happen. Outdoor entertainment parcels as small as 1 acre in rural residential neighborhood settings. That's the LDS, the low-density suburban. And if you look at the other ones, it's 2.5 acre, 5 acre, 10 acre. So things need to be tightened up. So we need to deny this and look at it with a little bit further review from the CABs.
Thank you.
Any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay.
William Naylor, followed by Marilyn Naylor.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is William Naylor. I'm representing the Washoe Valley Alliance. I would like 5 minutes if I can. And also, I've been a 39-year resident of the South Valleys area. As Mr. Young pointed out, this expands the typical uses under outdoor entertainment.
Sir, excuse me, you'll be allowed 3 minutes.
3 is all? I'm representing Washoe Valley
You'll
Alliance.
still be allowed 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Anyway, it now includes music venues, theaters, sports activities, racetracks, amusement parks, many, many diverse activities. Consider the size of these activities and what they require when you look at this proposed amendment. Even for a minor event, 999 people, which probably translates to about 500 vehicles, would be present in that location. Let's consider Hawkins Amphitheater. I think you're all familiar with that. It only seats 400 people. It has a total capacity of 900 people. That's a pretty big facility and a lot of parking, and it doesn't even come up to the top of the minor entertainment activity. These are the kinds of things that are trying to be put into our neighborhoods. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, the new article links permanent events to the required venue. So if you approve a motocross race, you also approve that person being able to build a track to support that motocross race in somebody's neighborhood. The allowed regulatory zones are greatly expanded. He showed the old ones. The new ones in particular, low-density rural, 10 acres, medium-density rural, 5 acres, high-density rural, 2.5 acres, low-density suburban, 1 acre. You look at these events and tell me that any of those could be comfortably done on small residential parcels like that. These are primarily these zones or uses were created for residential use or small commercial, which related to the residents in that area, not outdoor entertainment events. General commercial, neighborhood commercial may also be small. He talked about the Warm Springs equestrian uses. It's interesting that that use specifies a parcel, a minimum of 35 acres. I would like to see that kind of parcel restriction put on these things like ski areas. The outdoor entertainment events require huge amounts of space. That should be specified in the regulation. As been pointed out, minor events greatly reduce public input. Their administrative review process. When we look at the kind of facilities that can be constructed to support these, I think that the public certainly should have an input into that. It's not fair to the public to put something in their neighborhood that they weren't able to discuss openly. We hope that you delay this particular code amendment, let it be talked out by all the cabs, by all the citizens, and come up with a much better product. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Marilyn Naylor, followed by Karen Kreider.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Marilyn Naylor. I'm a 36-year resident of Washoe County. For 15 years of my 30-year career as a teacher in Sparks, I was honored to be the chairperson for the beloved Sparks tradition, Jack's Carnival. This position gave me very personal experience with the impact of an outdoor entertainment of attendance of over 500 people and its impact on a neighborhood. Even after covering all the things that are listed under conditions of approval on page 338 in this draft that you're hearing about tonight, even after informing the police, the fire departments of time and date of our event, even after addressing all the issues of food, water, and sanitation, when all was said and done, the resulting negative impact on the neighborhood was unavoidable. There was always increased traffic, parking along neighborhood streets, increased noise, litter, lack of public respect for other people's property, and we were always feeling a heightened need for security, and I think that is going to even become more pronounced considering what has happened in our state. Currently, the permanent outdoor entertainment is only permitted in industrial, tourist, commercial, and parks and recreation. When one chooses to live nearby, the inconveniences associated with that outdoor event may be expected and tolerated. But now it's being proposed in all zoning areas, and the impact on the quality of life and welfare will substantially be a negative for the residents. The modification of a development code must meet the requirement that, quote, promotes health, safety, morals, convenience, property, and general welfare of the public as a minimum. This code amendment does not meet this criteria, and I don't feel the finding can be met to approve it at this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Karen Kreider, followed by J. Edward Parker.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Karen Kreider, and I live at 445 Puma Drive. I was going to do that in a minute. Thank you. Washoe Valley, Nevada. I've been a resident of Washoe Valley for 30 years. I'm also a board member of Washoe Valley Alliance. I'm concerned about the way this proposed amendment has been presented to the public and the lack of public input for an issue that could substantially impact people's quality of life. Only one poorly attended public workshop was held at night at the planning department. A few of us who attended only received the information regarding the meeting secondhand and at the last minute. The attendance and issues discussed were not included in the staff report. The draft of the proposed amendment was only presented to two cabs, Warm Springs and South Truckee Meadows, Washoe Valley. This is an important countywide issue and should have been formally presented to all cabs, including East Truckee Canyon, Incline Village, Crystal Bay, North Valleys, Spanish Springs, Sun Valley, and West Truckee Meadows. Comments from cab members and citizens were not included in the staff report for consideration by the Planning Commission. South Valley citizens had numerous issues with the proposal. The South Valley's cab asked to see a final draft of the amendment before moving on it. This has not been provided. The staff report contains an important note which states that this code amendment does not apply to the South Valleys or Warm Springs since they do not allow outdoor entertainment. Why then was this code amendment only presented to these two cabs? In fact, this is not true. In the South Valleys, only the Old Washoe City Character Management Area and the Steamboat Rural Transition Mixed Use Character Management Area, and those are the areas in pink, have special allowed use, tables which prohibit outdoor entertainment. The vast majority, the rest of the green, which is the South Meadows area, of the South Valleys area would be impacted by the county standard allowed use table. The important note was therefore inaccurate and misleading and may have prevented citizens from expressing concerns. Based on the lack of citizen input, incomplete reports, and misleading information, we respectfully request that action on this code amendment be delayed until it can be presented to all cabs so that Washoe County citizens can make their concerns known. Thank you.
Thank you.
J. Edward Parker.
Madam Chairman, Commissioners, and staff, my name is J. Edward Parker, and that's an initial J. I live at 6970 Powrod Drive in the Spanish Springs area. And I'm not here as myself, I'm here as the local government liaison to Washoe County from the American Radio Relay League. And as I listened to this presentation tonight, a couple of questions came up. The classifications of 75 to 299 and these things, I heard no criteria of who was going to determine what these events are supposed to be. I also am concerned with how the nonprofit organizations in this community will be treated with this proposed legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment?
No further public comment.
Commissioner questions?
May I, Madam Chair?
Yes, absolutely.
My question is related to something that was addressed by the public feedback we just heard. And my question is, when did the public see the final draft and what mechanism was used to solicit their feedback? I noticed in the presentation, first of all, Mr. Young, thank you for an excellent presentation. I know that you put a lot of work into this, and I respect that. But you mentioned a variety of drafts were prepared. And I was just wondering if the public had an opportunity to see a final draft, and was there feedback then solicited? And what mechanism was used to do that, if so?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure how development code amendments like the previous two are drafted. When we're presented with something this complex, there are always multiple drafts. The original couple of drafts were unrecognizable from what we're doing now because we take those drafts, we take them out, show them to review agencies, Reno and Sparks, other people, they come back and go back to the drawing board, try again. So there's always a lot of drafts. The draft that is presented tonight was considered a final draft about 2 weeks ago. Meaning, and by final draft, what that means is that the Deputy DA, Mr. Edwards, my managers, Mr. Webb, and the directors of the department have had a chance to look over it, provide all of their comments, provide all of their copy editing, legal editing, and then I've sat down and put together that final draft. That's what a final draft means. The final draft of, how would you put it, of consequence, of substance, that had all of the spelled out processes and tiers and so forth, was probably completed about a month ago. Probably about a month ago. So I'm not sure which draft we took to Washoe Valley. It wasn't the final draft, as was mentioned, and they certainly did request that. That was one of the things that they requested, was come back and let us see the shiny final result. Warm Springs Cab didn't request that, but the version that they got would have been the same that the South Valley's version got. So those two cabs didn't see the signed off, shiny done version that is presented to you tonight, but they did see versions that included the substance that is presented to you tonight.
And if I might, Madam Chair, keep in mind, planning commissioners, that for department policy, development code amendments that are countywide do not go out to each and every CAB. Matter of fact, out of the 4 that you hear tonight, 3 of those specifically did not. All 4 of these, however, had the public workshop notification. As Mr. Young had noted, this is a little different only because this included specific amendments to the Warm Springs modifiers in the development code. That's why it was presented to Warm Springs Citizens Advisory Board. Again, that's consistent with the department policy. The visit out to the South Valley's areas, South Truckee Meadows, South Valley, Washoe Valley Citizens Advisory Board, was a courtesy understanding, to be honest with you, the restriction that's within certain components of the South Valley's area plan that currently prohibit outdoor entertainment as a permanent use type in those 2 character management areas. But holistically, development code amendments do not go out to all CABs. There's not enough time in the process, and that's why we host the CAB workshop. As with any member of the public, when those drafts were available for your review, is at the same time those final drafts were. There were changes made after the public workshops and the 2 CAB meetings, incorporating a couple of the comments that were made into those drafts. Concerned citizens, again, not the good answer, but the way it exists, can go online and get a hold of the staff reports and the copies and take a look at it and provide input here if they so desire at the Planning Commission. That's what the purpose of this is for development code amendments.
So if I'm understanding correctly, this is the first opportunity that you've had to hear these comments and potentially investigate their relevancy to the work you've done. And I want to say that I appreciate that when I do much of the same type of work in my professional life. And I appreciate that you do a thorough job and a thorough investigation of developing these regulations as best as you can from a staff perspective. But I think what I've always seen missing in bureaucracies is that when the public does have an opportunity for feedback, there's then not a chance for staff to say, well, maybe this needs tweaking, maybe we ought to go back out and consider this. So I guess my concern with this whole process, and I guess I'm getting past questions and into commentary, but I think that what you've done is terrific stuff. It's a good idea to rewrite the code. I'm on board with what the County Commission has done. I think what you've done is a terrific beginning. But I, too, have some concerns about some of the expanded zoning. I have some concerns about the lack of opportunity to go back to the communities and present the final product, if you will, for additional feedback. So I guess I'm just saying, have you, I'm turning it back into a question, have you had an opportunity to consider some of the things we've heard tonight, and what are your thoughts on that?
And I guess if I might jump back in again, to be blunt, that's the commission's role this evening, is to listen to what the public has to say, and as commissioners, to raise those questions of staff, to seek those responses. You can end up in a constant do loop if you so desire, but ultimately the buck stops here. That's your planning commission's responsibility to listen to the public, determine what you believe as representatives appointed by the county commissioners, to sit as a whole, as a commission, to determine what those questions are of staff, and determine as a commission later on, as a group, what's your decision to deny or recommend approval, and that's really where you rest.
I appreciate that, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes. And I do want to get to all the other commissioners, so.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I promise I won't go past 10.
Okay.
So with
You won't
respect
go
to-
past 8:45.
I appreciate that. It'll take a minute. So I appreciate that. One of the things that I've learned since I've been sitting here as a commissioner is that we're asked to accept staff recommendations and then rule on that as if it's completely informed. And I think oftentimes the staff hasn't had the opportunity to hear what we hear at these commission from the public. And so my caution is that I appreciate it is our job to do that. I'm asking the questions if in a public forum so that staff can respond and say, no, there was no process for incorporating that feedback into the loop, into the final draft that is then recommended for us to move on. So I think that that was an important differentiation. So thank you for that.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. A short response so that you know whether we were able to respond to the public input. The public input you heard tonight is the same public input that we heard at the CAB meetings. We had, in addition to the CAB meetings that you heard tonight, that I didn't express to you, there were those concerns about process. And we typically don't include those because there's almost guaranteed to be some dissatisfaction with the process. Going to all, for instance, going to all the cabs, I didn't mention that they said they wanted this to go to all the cabs because it's not part of the process. It would take some special dispensation, some special decision to direct me to go to all the cabs for this. So I don't bring that up with you. What I did at the meetings was express to both cabs that the deadline for my staff report was too soon to incorporate their comments in the staff report and incorporate their comments, their changes in the draft. What I committed to them was to put it in the PowerPoint in the presentation. And I apologize to the community if I didn't completely fulfill that promise, but what I promised to them was to bring up with you that they have concerns about the expansive range of the thresholds, and they have concerns about really what they almost feel is the sanctity of their public meetings, of their CAB meetings, and their ability to come here and to the Board of Adjustment to talk things over. Those were the two big themes that came out of those meetings, that the proposal is going too far on the administrative approval side and that the threshold is too large. And I committed that I would bring that up with you at this hearing. Now, we go ahead and recommend approval. We could recommend that you just talk it over and do what you want. Our recommendation of approval is based on the idea that we've done our best to incorporate these things. If you decide that there's something in this that has to change, that's what I expect you to tell me tonight, that you're not going to let this go forward until I take it back and change it. Or you might say, you know what, we've talked it through, now I understand, okay, move it forward to the county commission. You can also move things forward to the county commission with in your report, in your discussion that says, well, we're recommending approval, but we've got some concerns, and here's our concerns. Here's the things we'd like you to consider as you review this. We recommended approval, but we're still a little cautious on these issues. So you have a lot of options for how you'd like to move forward to make sure that you feel like you're responding to what you heard tonight.
If I may, I'm just going to go down the line through all the commissioners. Commissioner Donchek, any questions?
Eric, yes, I have a question. When you added all the different parameters of where it could happen, was there any thought to the size, as mentioned, to the size of the land, the acreage that had to be used as a minimum for the size of the events that you were going to allow?
Yes, through the chair, Commissioner Donchik, there was some concern about that. I think maybe some of the very early drafts may have attempted to do that. The issue arises that all events are different. Some events may be perfectly appropriate for a 1 acre parcel. Some events would be so wholly inappropriate for a 1 acre parcel that it's almost a joke that it's technically possible. And I think the community has generally looked at that idea that, well, this technically would allow some pretty impactful events on a 2.5 acre parcel, on a 5 acre parcel. Some of the numbers we heard about comparing Bartley Ranch to 500 people, where that fits in. So we did look, we were concerned about that, and at the end of the day, the idea that each of these events is potentially so different that they need to be reviewed individually and independently won over the idea of having a table or some sort of ability to say, this requires 5 acres, this requires 10 acres, this is a minimum. Have minimums for all the different uses. So at the end, what that really means, and staff absolutely recognizes this is not lost on us, that we're asking you, we're asking the community, we're asking even review agencies to have faith in the ability of review agencies and in the ability of the process to not allow irrational things like that to move forward. So there is inherent in this proposal a leap of faith on many people's parts that everybody's going to do their job.
Thank you.
Commissioner Haran.
I guess the challenge I have is, why are we leaping to the point where we allow temporary uses of these facilities in various, every place, and we only allowed permanent in 3 areas, that we're leaping to allowing permanent in all these other areas? I have a little bit of an issue with that. And incidentally, I appreciate Director Webb's comments about, we're always going to get agreement and disagreement from the public as to what is right and what is wrong, and it is our job to decide based on the facts. So I appreciate that. But anyway, that's my question, sure. Mr. Young.
And if I might jump in, I've been dealing with this since I was first appointed planning manager back in 1999, believe it or not. And it's been a conundrum from day one. So let me pick on somebody sort of neutral, the golf tournament. I've processed every one of the golf tournaments in Montreux. Every year, it's the same request. I want to be a permanent event. Cannot do it. And the reason we cannot do it is because if you read the current definition for outdoor entertainment, it has to be a principally spectator event. So if you think about what was originally called the Lucas Oil facility out in Truckee Canyon where they had the motocross events, that was actually a truly outdoor entertainment event and was approved through a special use permits in the correct regulatory zone. But that is principally an outdoor entertainment, spectator-driven event. They have a place where the cars drive around and they have bleachers where people sit. Not the same with the golf tournament and its various ownership permutations throughout the year. You have a golf course, and that golf course, by its inherent nature, has tournaments, but internal to the membership of that in particular golf course. When they want to have an event such as they hold every year, and they invite more than 1,000 people on any one day to participate, which is good for them, it doesn't fit into outdoor entertainment. There's no way that they can be a permanent event in today's code. So the challenge to face staff is, what do we do? How do we allow that? And I'll go to the other end of the spectrum, which is what Mr. Young briefly mentioned. Commercial stables, by the definition, is boarding only. That's it. If staff were to follow that, all the special use permits that have allowed other types of equestrian activities, with the exception of Warren Springs for a couple of small events that have been approved since those code amendments came in, are bending the code way out of shape. Because when you have commercial stables, if you're only doing boarding, you're only allowed to do boarding. What we've done is we've recognized that the equestrian uses, as Mr. Young has mentioned, cannot be established as a permanent use. They can only be established as a temporary use under Article 310, because that article allows for temporary uses in any regulatory zone for a maximum of 10 consecutive days. So what staff did is it used the provision and allows the use permit process to modify the code to go ahead and approve those as permanent uses. I'll pick on South Valleys, the Franktown equestrian events that have been occurring there for many years. That's how that was done, as a permanent use. So this is staff's attempt to answer that question. How do we then provide for these permanent types of uses that are really more than just the design of the facility? So you have a equestrian facility that has certain size, and you're going to bring in crowds for a certain number of days on a reoccurring annual basis. How do we do that? Mr. Young's research, looking at the other jurisdictions, this is staff's best effort to try and answer that specific question. We need to come up with an answer of how to allow temporary and permanent out of two completely different codes and merge them into one.
That was a rather long speech. And I appreciate it. You know, it is a conundrum, as you stated, but again, you know, I think there's got to be an elegant way to structure something that says, yeah, we know that the Barracuda is going to be out there every August for 8 days or whatever it is, and they're going to have, you know, 3,000 people or whatever it is, as opposed to saying we're going to blanket and allow all of this permanent use in all of these areas, and we hope that the staff does their job. That's as Mr. Young kind of said, right?
Well, and again, keep in mind that there's still, regardless, 74 and below, slightly different because that's currently how we handle it with the business license process. There's still an agency review. The process for 75 and above still includes public notice. That's one of the major differences between us and the two cities, and that's one of what Mr. Young referred to as the stanchions of how we do business, is we're going to make sure the public's noticed. The public has the opportunity to provide comment to the director in that decision. That's one of the stanchions that's going to be there. The other process is we actually swiped from the business license codes the required components of review and put them inside the development code. Currently, when you are going to take a look at an administrative permit, which is what a outdoor event 300 to 999 has to go through today, an administrative permit, and we mentioned that earlier, the difference between administrative permit and administrative review. When they do that, there is no standards for the require of that review. We swipe from the business license code those standards that are in here. Who has to take a look at it, which was mentioned by the public, for instance, hours of operations. That's now in here. It's in the business license code that I have to look at it for the business license. Now it's a part of you. If you go with this code, this is where it's laid out. The other thing that we put in here, which is not in the current development code out of the business license code, is you got a problem with your tournament or your special event, whether it's temporary or permanent. How do I handle that as staff? So coming out of the business license code incorporated in here, which is currently not a part of the administrative permit review, is what do I got to do if I got to suspend or revoke you? What happens if the fire marshal comes out and says, you need to stop right now? Or sadly, when we've had one of our major events that's had some issues in your neck of the woods, Commissioner
Yes.
Moran, how do we treat that? And what's our process as staff to make sure that you're not living up to your conditions, which is really what the neighbors had talked about? What's that process that can be used? And this is staff's attempt to say, here's a mechanism to go do that, to review at the end that you're meeting those pre-event, those during event, and those post-event conditions. All of those, by the way, come out of the business license code, but are now being incorporated in here for the permit and for the permit review to say you can do it temporarily or you can do it permanent under these conditions, case by case, as Mr. Young mentioned.
Thank you. I'll pass now.
Commissioner Chesney.
Secretary Webb has pretty well answered all my questions. That was a mouthful right there, buddy, I'll tell you.
With a passion.
Yeah, and I get it. We had some questions at our cab. The cab was pretty well satisfied. You know, we understand the events. I mean, if somebody's going to come over and help me brand some calves or something like that, it's not included in these things. And I have a little bit of heartburn with Warm Springs being singled out to be brought into the fold, as it were, because when we wrote our area plan, in the 3 years that it took us to do it, to rewrite it, we fought really hard to get some things changed in Article 302, and it appears that some of that stuff is going to be overwritten in this new code, but I don't see it to be that objectionable.
And for Commissioner Chesney, if I might add, one of the changes that Mr. Young and I actually spoke about was to make sure, to the degree possible, that those modifiers in Warm Springs actually remained as they were. If you read the actual code draft and look at what was stricken through and what's been added, the major difference is that in the Warm Springs planning area, specific for an equestrian event, now you have to get a special use permit. Under this proposal, you would get whatever is required. If you're going to be under 999, it's that administrative process. If you're going to be 1,000 or more, got to defer to state law, got to do a public hearing. Got to do a public hearing and a special use permit anyway, so you're not losing anything. The only thing you gain is if you happen to be in that slightly less threshold, the tier that Mr. Young talked about.
Commissioner Haran.
What is the ability to correct if staff decides that they're somehow decide to do something really silly and approve something for an area that really they shouldn't have approved? What is the remedy for that?
In response to Commissioner Haran, and I'm sadly stealing Mr. Young's thunder, so I should probably just go out and go to the restroom like I was going to a while ago. But to be honest with you, from the citizen's perspective, first and foremost is there's two things. So if it's a business, or actually three things, because we have the three tiers, and it's sort of like we exist today. If there's a business license issued for a special event, it's only for 30 days in a year. Those complaints come through code compliance. They come up to me as the business license director. If there's a problem, I have to take various actions. But from the citizen's perspective, if there's an issue, then they go to their county commissioners and say, why the heck is Mr. Webb issuing a business license? Because we've got all these issues, and I'm called to the carpet on that. From the licensee's perspective, if I decide to deny their special event, that's appealable to the Board of County Commissioners, because as staff member, when I take that action on a license, there's a process. That's the appeal process. You move into the next tier under this proposal, where there's a decision by the Director of Planning and Building Division in this case. Again, if a citizen who is written in as a written comment and feels that their written comments were not considered, and they have to be noticed by the way of the decision. That's what this process says. That's mirroring what we do currently for detached accessory dwellings. If the citizen's not happy with that, then what they use is the current code provision that say, I can appeal that decision of the director. And there's a process where that happens, where it goes through first actually for this case, it would go straight to the Board of Adjustment to hear that, the appeal of the decisions director, if they're not happy with that, and then go to the Board of County Commissioners. If it's the permit holder that's not happy with it, they too can appeal it, same process, to go to the Board of Adjustment and ultimately the Board of County Commissioners. Final threshold is how it exists today. For what we call outdoor festivals, it would just change the name, goes to the Board of County Commissioners, they're the ones who hear it. You're not happy with that, got to go to court. But that's how it is today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Some questions that I have, if I heard everyone, Eric and Bob, correctly, with all of this, because blending in the business license component, there are specifications for traffic, for use, for all of that stuff is noted, and the applicant is told what they can or cannot do. Correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, maybe I've been using the term review agency all evening, and maybe I assumed everybody had a full understanding of what the review agencies are and what they do.
We do.
I actually almost, in the PowerPoint, I almost inserted what's called the review agency checklist. It's the list of all the review agencies that we have the potential to send it out to. And when we get a new application, regardless of what it is, all of our applications, one of the planner's first jobs is to go through that list and check the boxes of all the review agencies that need to review that permit. The review agencies are the federal agencies that are in town, state agencies, water, wildlife, of course the various fire departments. There's several fire departments in the region. Internal review agencies to the county from capital projects, engineering, VHEED often gets them, building gets them, health absolutely gets them. They have a certain amount of days to review the application and send us back comments. Those comments are in the form of conditions of approval or reasons for denial. So that's what we get back. It's almost always conditions of approval. Usually if there's a reason for denial, we're working with the applicant as much as we can to get the adjustments and to get them on track. And rarely is that not possible. Every now and then it's not. Most of the time what we're working with is conditions of approval. Those conditions of approval are what are adopted by either the director or the county commission, or you guys adopt conditions of approval all the time for your special use permits that you don't get to see a lot of them, but there's a couple you still get to see. So there are conditions of approval. Whatever those agencies say has to happen, has to happen. Now they're responsible for ensuring those conditions happen. That means that there's not going to be a planner going out to the site and looking for fire code violations, right? We're going to look at the things that we said. Are you doing these things? Health is going to look at their things. Fire is going to look at their things. We're all responsible for our own conditions, but we all go out there and do those. So that's what a review agency is, and that's how that works. Everybody gets to send in their comments, usually a condition of approval. Then those conditions of approval are adopted by either the director or the board as part of the approval, and that's what the applicant is stuck with. They have to do those things. And if they are found to not be doing those things, then the suspension and/or revocation can come into play. Then we can go out there and say, it's not working, we're gonna shut you down. Or what would often happen is we would say, if it's a during event issue that's not a real life safety issue, that we don't feel it has to be shut down right now, what we're going to do is we're going to talk to them and say, this event is not going to happen next year unless these things happen. We're going to work with applicants. We're going to work with people to try and bring them into conformance. If at some point it becomes clear that that's just not possible, then this new code provides for our ability to take away their permit or to modify it.
Okay.
And if I might, for the commission, if you look at page 338-7. It has a section entitled Conditions of Approval. And that conditions of approval, and I'll just cover it briefly for the members of the public or listening audience who maybe not have the draft in front of them. Very broadly, it says that the BCC or the director will impose conditions addressing facilities, pre-event, during event, post-event conditions, which may or may not require inspection. The BCC or the director may include timeframes and methods of periodic review of the permit. And this is what Mr. Young just alluded to determine if the existing conditions of approval are adequate. And if they're not adequate, new conditions may be imposed to ensure public health and safety and welfare. However, all conditions, at a minimum, will address police protection, food, water, sanitation, garbage disposal, and medical services, access, traffic, parking, camping, and illumination, hours of operation, fire protection, financial ability to meet those conditions, indemnification, and insurance.
At a minimum, those things.
Thank you. The final question that I have is that I'm again asking how notification is done. And this is becoming like a big thorn in my side because I'm trying to figure out how the community hears this. When we say that an all-cab meeting was announced, through CMail, I've asked to receive all CAB notifications. I receive none. So I'm just asking how that notification is done, and if there's a glitch in the system or something, if we can do that. And there's probably not an answer for that tonight, but I would like to have staff to review this, to show me the tree or show me how we get that notification. Okay.
And just for the chair, yes, we've been working on that, particularly for email notice. Postal notification went out to the CAB mailing list. And I would offer, it's not a good answer, but at least the development code amendments go one step further than county code amendments do.
Mm-hmm.
County code amendments, like Chapter 25, to be honest with you, will be noticed in the newspaper prior to the public hearing for first and second readings. Thankfully, development code goes a little bit deeper than that. It's part of that culture I talked about with this whole development code process, at least to try and get some sort of public exposure and public notification, good, bad, or indifferent, to at least that point.
So maybe the solution is, instead of getting electronic notification, that I go back to mail notification. So, okay. Commissioner Bruce.
I thought the light was supposed to come on.
It sort of is, yeah. There we go.
Okay.
Try it.
Hello?
There you go.
Testing. Okay. Couple of things. One is that, as I understood, at least a comment that was made by Mr. Young. Actually, let me say something else first. To begin with, I appreciate your efforts. This is extremely complex. It is what I would call pervasively complex. And it's very difficult. And you've worked hard on it. And you've done a lot that's good. I'm not quite prepared to agree with you 100%. Now, the comment that I was going to question you on is you indicated to me, or you indicated, I thought, that the original initiation order, so to speak, on this process has expired. Is that is correct?
Yes, sir.
So, in terms of the pervasive complexity here, what if we took a little extra time to make it as, shall we say, as transparent as possible? Because I think this thing affects a lot. And I have a serious question in terms of, I don't like the permanency, for example. I'm thinking 10 years, renewable. you know, I would argue with you on the 75 versus 99, but that's a little thing, and I wouldn't vote no just on that point. But I really question with the permanency of it and the way that it's set up, how it really isn't potentially affecting master plans negatively. And given that it's basically what you said, not initiated, then I would suggest that we table it for reconsideration at a later meeting. And I so move.
Well, let me finish getting the remainder of our commissioners' comments, and then we'll close the public hearing and bring it back for board consideration.
And in response to this, to that specific question from Commissioner Bruce, keep in mind, it was a request by the county commission to initiate. 125 days expired, so for expediency, what staff's decision was to have the planning commission initiate and move forward. The request from this commission would have to be to table. You could, and I'm not discounting the argument, but to table indefinitely, I would recommend is not on the table, given that the county commission had initiated it. You could certainly decide to bring it back or initiate and then bring it back. But again, taking it totally off the table and sitting on it, I recommend is probably not a course of action.
I didn't really intend to take it off the table permanently. I appreciate that comment.
Commissioner Barnes.
Yes, I think all my questions have pretty much been answered, so I don't have any additional. Thank you.
Thank you. So does commission have any further questions of staff, presenters, or the public? If not, I'm closing the public hearing and bringing it back to the board. Okay, so if I'm understanding the options that are before us this evening that I heard float from different, is that we can deny this, and please jump in if I'm going into places where I should not be, or we can move forward on the initiation and bring it back for further review on amendments. Or we can approve both the initiation and the amendment. Would I be correct in?
Yes. Yeah, yes, you could proceed in that manner. You could simply initiate and then just take no action on the recommendation
On
tonight.
the amendment, okay.
Yeah, and then it can be brought back
Okay.
in the future.
Okay.
And just for staff certification, again, as with anything, I recommend if you choose to do that, you provide staff obviously some firm guidance about what you would like to see different in the return, so staff has something to work from.
Yes. So given all that, does anyone dare to venture into a motion? Very good, Commissioner Huron.
Well, I'm not going to venture to a motion just yet.
Okay, venture into discussion, okay.
I'll venture into discussion. And Eric, I think, thank you very much. I mean, it's a big challenge, and I think that you've brought it forward very well. And I would like to thank Director Webb for his eloquent way of clarifying my thought processes as to what we had before us and the difference between temporary and permanent in the repercussions and the ability to work within that framework. To address Mr. Bruce's comments about the permanency, you know, I think that I could get over that from the standpoint that there's always a review if it's not working. And it doesn't necessarily go on for 100 years without a review. So that would be my comment to that as far as the permanency of it was required. And the fact that it does have to be approved, and we do have talented people approving that, and there are ways to appeal that. I think that in some respects that the recommendations by Mr. Young make a lot of sense. And I think that, you know, based on the discussions and the questions that I had and the questions of the other other members of the board, as well as taking into account the concerns of the public, I could probably support the application as it is presented.
Other comments from commissioners?
If I might, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
I agree that we ought to initiate action and provide direction to staff. I'm not comfortable approving, and I cannot approve the amendment as it stands because I have too many concerns about it. My chief concern is the lack of opportunity for the community to provide meaningful feedback. I have a couple of concerns. Each commissioner has a couple of concerns, and we can express those. And so I suppose that we could add conditions of approval or amendments to what's being done. But I think we're usurping our responsibility to the community to hear what they have to say by doing so. I completely understand we need to initiate and move this forward. I think you've done a terrific job. I really do, Mr. Young. I commend you. But I think each of us has different concerns, and I'd like to see those addressed in a more public forum. So I agree with what you said, too, Mr. Webb, that we need to provide clear direction. And so to me, a clear direction would be to say, yes, let's initiate let's do the initiation, but let's provide clear direction on a public workshop that is a little bit better advertised than what we saw before. And I'm not criticizing staff. I know you have a process, but I just don't think it was effective. I think the turnout tonight would be an example of I know that there's a lot more concern in the community than what we saw here tonight. And so those are my thoughts on it. I cannot, in good conscience, move forward with this thing as written, because I, for one, don't like the broad inclusion of rural communities. You know, 1 acre residential is being thrown in with other categories that I think need to be included. I don't think it's broad enough right now. I agree, but I think that we've gone too far, too fast, and those are my thoughts. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we are now at a place to entertain a motion, and we have.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Moran.
Could I make another comment, please?
Yes, you certainly can.
I think that, addressing the concern about, 1 acre, 10 acre, 15 acre, 25 acre, whatever it is, right now that those are all included on a temporary basis. And I think,
No.
well, I've got the director shaking his head like this, and
My understanding is with the outdoor entertainment that it's restricted to the categories of 3 specific categories that are commercial, industrial, and whatever they are. But the rural residential is not included for entertainment, outdoor entertainment. Am I wrong?
Madam Chair, the way that I think there's still a little bit of a disconnect between establishing it as a permanent use and establishing it as a temporary use. Currently, it is only allowed as a permanent use in those 3 regulatory zones: industrial, tourist, commercial, and parks and recreation. But it is allowed as a temporary use in any regulatory zone, given the appropriate review process, one of those 4 review processes that was defined.
And
I had my aha moment on that.
yes, and I did, and I think the last time we had these complex tables put in front of us, and I know that they're just cut and paste from the whole code, but I think for the commission's sake as well as the public's sake, if you would put the legend down there as to what the little dashes mean, I mean, because in the code, you see all those.
Oh, that should be there. That's my fault if that's not there. That should have been
I
there.
think I missed it, so.
Yeah, I agree that needs to be there. I apologize if it's not there.
It's not here, so, just.
That's just a part of the table that needs
Yeah,
to be included.
Yeah, and then that helps everybody to say what it,
Right.
not allowed and all of that. Okay, are there any other?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
If we initiate it tonight, doesn't that start the clock ticking again?
Yes, sir.
On a 120-day clock,
So
25.
125-day clock.
that's why I was
So it
saying,
would come back, if we initiate then and give feedback to staff for the amendments to come, then would come back for us for consideration for passing the amendment, correct?
Correct. 125-day shot clock starts again. We have to
Yes.
get it back to you for a public hearing and action within 125 days
days.
of initiation.
Back to the planning commission, not to the
Right.
planning commission and the county commission.
No, just back
Okay,
here.
I'm good with that. I'm good with initiating.
And any other comments, questions, concerns from the members of the commission? I again ask, we have 2 motions, one to initiate, and then if we want to take action on the amendments.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes.
I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission initiate the amendment of the Washoe County Code, Chapter 110, within Article 226, Warm Springs, Article 302, Allowed Uses, Article 304, Use Classification System, Article 310, Temporary Uses, and Article 338, Outdoor Entertainment, as described in the staff report and discussed at the public hearing.
Second.
So I am going to take these separately. So it has been moved by Commissioner Lawson and seconded by Commissioner Haran to initiate. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Haran.
On the amendment, I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission recommend approval of WDCA 17-0003 to amend Washoe County Chapter 110 Development Code within Article 226 Warm Springs, Article 302 Allowed Uses, Article 304 Use Classification Systems, Article 310 Temporary Uses, and Article 338 Outdoor Entertainment. I further move to authorize the chair to sign the resolution contained in Attachment A on behalf of the Washoe County Planning Commission and to direct staff to present a report of this commission's recommendation to the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners within 60 days of today's dates. This recommendation for approval is based on all the following 4 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110-818-15E. Those being consistency, promotes the purpose, response to change conditions, and no adverse effects.
Is there a second? Motion dies with no second. So is there an alternative to, in terms of the amendment, to offer feedback to staff as this coming? So now we need to move on to deny the amendment, or no, we can just,
My recommendation would be not to do that unless you plan on killing it right here.
no, we do not.
If you do, if there isn't a sense that that's what you want to do, then I would say have that vote. If you vote to deny it, then it doesn't get brought back.
It doesn't get brought
It's
back,
gone
okay.
unless somebody appeals it to the
Okay.
county commission. So as of now, it's been initiated. And
So
then
now we
it will
provide
be brought back
feedback.
within the 125 days for a vote at that point in time to recommend approval or denial.
Okay. So now I'm going to ask for specific and, as short as possible, feedback to our planning staff to bring the amendments back to us.
Well, and I need to
Or-
jump in
okay.
on that too. I think staff has been tracking, the
Well,
various
I thought so
points.
too.
Yes, and at this point, you are agendized to either move to initiate or not, and to either recommend approval or deny. You've already taken action
to
to
initiate.
initiate. Staff has been participating in and tracking the comments and the input from the commission tonight. There's also going to be a video and minutes and those types of things. So at this point, my recommendation would not be to do another motion saying, and we
Okay.
want, all these things included, because it's
Okay.
been covered, and they can address it, and then it can be brought back at that time. There's a risk in doing it that way because of the way the agenda is written to initiate and recommend approval.
Okay.
If you take a third action, you may be arguably stepping outside the agenda.
Outside, okay.
So we move on.
We're done with
you're
this
done.
agenda item.
I think so.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your
Thank you.
patience.
Eric, thank you very much.
Thank you.
But we are not done with the agenda.
No,
We are,
Eric, I want to thank you for all your hard work. I know that this has been a journey for you, and I really want to thank you
Yes.
for your hard work.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate your effort.
Like to second that.
We'll see you in 125 days.
We'll see you before then.
Before then.
Maybe before then.
Okay, now we're to item 9D. So if the staff, oh, he's reading it into the record? Okay.
I'm going to let Mr. Webb take a restroom break, and I'll
Oh, that's why we don't get. Okay.
Should we take it? Should we take
Not
it
allowed,
to
Bob. You're leaving in the middle of the meeting.
Just-
everybody?
The question is from Commissioner Bruce is if we need, does any others need a break? We'll take a 5-minute break.
Do you need a couple? We'll take it. I hate doing that. I hate doing that in the middle of a meeting. And I'm trying not to sneeze. And
At least I got it off the table.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Somebody had to say it.
Hi, how did it go?
Didn't get Monday. Dawn was there. Dawn has got a musician. She was there with baby. She was babysitting.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know how many kids she had.
We got 5 years, both in over 300+ hours.
Hello. Yes.
I just wanted to talk about the Washoe Valley Alliance a little bit. We are a Nevada nonprofit corporation and a federal 501c3 organization. We have 187 dues-paying members and a whole lot more that we communicate with. So I guess I was a little
item 9D. Now, Mr. Webb, you'll read all this into the record.
With pleasure.
Now that you're back.
Development Code Amendment Case Number WDCA 17-006, minor deviations, for possible action, hearing, and discussion pursuant to NRS 278.319 to initiate an amendment to Washoe County Code Chapter 110 within Article 804 to add Section 110.804.35, minor deviations, to allow the Director of the Planning and Building Division to grant minor deviations of standards within Chapter 110 of the Washoe County Code for deviations less than 10% of the applicable Development Code standard, to establish an application process for minor deviations, and if the proposed amendment is initiated, public hearing and further possible action to deny or recommend approval of the proposed amendment, and if approval is recommended, to authorize the chair to sign a resolution to that effect. The planning manager for this is Mr. Trevor Lloyd.
Do we have disclosures by commissioners, either ethics or ex parte? I'm going to open the public hearing. Staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. For the record, Trevor Lloyd, planning manager. The request before you tonight is another development code amendment for tonight. I'm very excited
To bring this forward. I believe this code amendment is long overdue. If I could, this proposed language, the code language, is shown on the overhead in red. Just to give you a little bit of background, what we are proposing tonight is essentially to establish or adopt new code language that will mirror the language found in NRS. And it is one that, as I said, it's long overdue. It really is. When we in terms of customer service and basically serving those folks that come in and don't want to go through a lengthy public hearing process, don't want to go through a lengthy variance process, having to meet the necessary findings that can be very challenging with any variance, when in fact the request is essentially not onerous, it's innocuous. That's the intent of this code amendment. The code amendment will also establish an application and review process for doing just that. When there is a deviation from a standard of code that is less than 10%, this new minor deviation process will allow for an alternative process to a variance, and that is essentially handling it administratively through a director's modification of those standards. There is certainly general consensus among the staff that this amendment is, like I said, it's overdue. I could offer many examples of situations where a minor deviation process would be very valuable. For the most part, what we're going to see are reductions in setbacks where that several inches, maybe up to a foot, is necessary, where you and I looking on the ground would not be able to see a noticeable difference, where such an impact is not going to be impactful. There's also written into this language and provided in NRS is the requirement for the neighbor to get the approval of the immediate neighbor that would be impacted by such a request. And when this comes in, also gives us or the director an opportunity to say, well, it's not just the most immediate neighbor, but there may be another neighbor or two that would also be impacted, and therefore we would require the consent of those neighbors as well. So these typical deviations, what we can expect, as I mentioned, setbacks. We're probably going to see most of the requests involved with a minor setback deviation. But it could also involve building heights or fence heights or other such deviations. But keep in mind, each request will have to, each application will have to provide the extenuating circumstances and the justification for the need for that minor deviation. But we won't go into the findings of, for example, of a hardship. And those findings can be very difficult to meet. Now, I know this board, you don't deal with variances very often. The Board of Adjustment does. They're very intimately aware of what's involved in establishing those findings. It can be very, very challenging. We don't require that they meet all of the findings, but what we do require is that they establish extenuating circumstances as well as essentially no detriment to the surrounding neighbors. What the minor deviations will not allow, for example, we will not allow through a minor deviation a variance in lot size. We won't allow a varying of allowable uses. So if you're saying a 10%, you can't go down that road. Also, accessory uses, there may be a question of whether or not the minor deviation will allow for an additional size for an accessory dwelling, and that simply won't be allowed either. We also held an all-cab workshop. Similar to the other code amendments, nobody showed up when we noticed that. We also provided legal notice as required per code and NRS. Staff it feels that this request meets all of the 4 required findings, those being consistency with the master plan, promotes the purpose of the development code, responds to changed conditions, and no adverse effects. With that, staff is recommending the following 2 possible motions for your consideration. The first being the initiation of the code amendment, the second being the motion itself for adopting and signing the resolution for this code amendment. And with that, I'm available for any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
I'm sorry? Okay.
No public comment.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the board. So I'm going to close public hearing and bring it back to the board for questions.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Haran.
Why are we in a position of deviating from the NRS to start out with?
Oh, no, this is matching NRS.
I know, but why are we not matching it already?
Oh, that's a very good question. And we just should have brought this.
Why, just history, or?
We should have brought this to you sooner.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
It's a good answer.
For Commissioner Haran, we've actually maintained what we call our hit list of development code amendments, those low-hanging fruit that we wanted to get to for, now the past 10 years. It's been on the radar for a long time, and we finally have the staff capacity to begin picking off these development code amendments of this flavor, this being one. The other 2 that you saw are also examples of that.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner questions?
I have one.
Okay.
Do you anticipate multiple minor deviations in basically a plan, shall we say?
What we will expect multiple deviations throughout the year. At least we certainly hope so. Any given, for example, any given week, if you ask a planner if there is a need for this kind of a process, they will tell you absolutely. We get these all the time.
No, I'm talking about with regard to a specific applicant, shall we say, who is requesting a minor deviation and having to, of the director. It says the applicant must file a director's modification of standards. Application. Do you expect multiple filings from the same applicant for the same project?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So what you're asking is, can one applicant keep requesting additional 10% increases?
Yes.
No, a one-time 10%, it's actually less than 10% expansion, that would be the limit.
Okay, good. That's it.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I had a comment in response to Commissioner Haran's question about matching with NRS. It's not, the county's not currently out of line with the NRS. The NRS statute allows the county to create one of these ordinances, but it's not a requirement that the county have one of these ordinances. So it's not as though the NRS says one thing and the county just hasn't been following that. It's been a permissive statute in the NRS for some time, and the county's been allowed to do this, but has not been required to.
So would it be fair to say that this is replicating state law then?
Yes, this is taking advantage of permission from the legislature to create one of these ordinances.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments before I entertain a motion?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Chesney.
I move that after giving reason, this is the initiation. I'm
You
going to.
can roll them all into one.
I'm going to roll the initiation and the amendment into one motion. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission initiate the amendment to Washoe County Code Chapter 110, Article 804, variances as described in the staff report for WDCA 17-0006. The amendment, I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Planning Commission recommend approval of WDCA 17-006 to amend Washoe County Code Chapter 110 within Article 804 variances as described in the staff report for this matter. I further move to authorize the chair to sign the resolution contained in Attachment A on behalf of the Planning Commission and direct the staff to present a report of this commission's recommendation to the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners within 60 days of today's date. This recommendation for approval is based on the following 4 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code Section 110.818.15E. Within.
All 4 findings, yeah.
I second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Chesney and seconded by Commissioner Doncheck. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're now at item 10, planning items. If we could have the agenda item read into the record, please.
With pleasure. For possible action and discussion, provide direction to staff on the proposed revised rules, policies, and procedures, RPPs, for the Planning Commission regarding the conduct of meetings, hearings, and appeals to the Board of County Commissioners, governance matters such as quorum, voting record keeping, and the duties, responsibilities, and ethical rules for Planning Commission members. Staff will incorporate any provided direction into the proposed revised RPPs and bring the RPPs back to the Planning Commission at their November 7th, 2017 meeting for review and possible adoption. Direction can include amendments resulting in a full overhaul of the RPPs in order to streamline them and shorten them to coincide with the structure of the RPP amendments by the Board of Adjustment. Staff planner is Ms. Julie Olander.
Hello.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm Julie Olander, planner with Planning and Building Division. As Mr. Webb explained, the item before you is the update of the Planning Commission's rules, policies, and procedures. As some of you remember, in August, we brought this before to you asking for direction to review this document. We were hoped to create a more concise document that was simple to follow and easy to interpret it. Much like we did with Board of Adjustment. Nope, I'm not turning. Oh, sorry. Much like the updated Board of Adjustments, the RPPs that we did in 2016. At the August 1st meeting, it was explained that there'd be a 2-step procedure, and tonight is the first step, which we are asking you to give staff direction on the proposed RPPs. You had 3 exhibits in your staff report. The first was Exhibit A, which is the current RPPs. Exhibit B was the marked up one, and with the proposed changes, and Exhibit C is the final clean draft. We've gone through the RPPs to clean them up, removing procedures that are no longer needed, requirements that have changed. Other sections we've rewritten to make the language more clear and precise, and that's primarily our goal in updating this document. I do want to point out that Exhibit B did not come over in your staff report the way it had been intended. We had a problem. We had a problem with the marked up version. For some reason, it didn't want to come over into the document, and I do apologize for that, and I can bring that back to you at the November meeting. Personally, what I was doing is I was flipping back between the Exhibit A and Exhibit C, but I do apologize for that. And I'm available for any other questions that you might have.
Do we have questions of staff on this? Do we have any public comment related to this item?
No public comment.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
just want a clarification. So you admit that B wasn't exactly what it was fully intended, and there was some...
B is not even close to what it was supposed to be, so I do apologize. For some reason, it came out okay on the table of contents, but if you go any further into the document, it was all gone. And so all I was...
Most of it wasn't there to compare with.
Yeah, the only thing you could compare basically was A and C, which is a little more complex to do. Just had to be flipping pages at the same
Because
time.
I caught something that was changed in B, and then from the original changed in B, and then C, it went back to the original. And then there's something in C that was never in B, so that's where I got confused.
I apologize for that. I didn't
No, it's
catch
okay.
that. I just thought, yeah, I'm not sure that.
Well, under 3.4, originally under the B version, it said the commission will not take public comment on a continued item, which was a change from the original. And then back in C, you went back to where the chair shall ask if there was anyone in the audience to testify. So you went back to the original. And then in C, there was an additional, under 3.5, under general expectations, you added, which wasn't in B, but you added the decorum rules stated below apply to commissioners as well as members of the public, which is like a little added phrase that wasn't in, it was even further added from the B.
Yeah, I would totally ignore Exhibit B. I wouldn't use that one, because that just didn't seem to come over clear at all the way it was initially intended. And like I said, I do apologize. It had something, it didn't like those, that when we marked it up, it didn't like being carried over, and we tried several different ways, and I thought we got it right, but it is not right.
So what's before us is then, so the motion includes attachments B and C, but
So I would say it would just be C. I would refer to a council maybe on this one if,
Yeah, I think that'll do the trick. I mean, really, the whole point of this is, the whole point of this really is to streamline this. I mean, that's the overall point. It takes off about 9 pages of rules. And I'm past the point in my career where I think I can remember 9 pages of rules, you know? And so I think it's significant in the amount of red tape, so to speak, that it cuts out. And it really tries to maintain the core of the RPPs and the most important framework provisions, but take out a lot of the stuff that has just been accumulated over the years. This is basically like the garage, you know, where everything's just been stashed over time, and you go back through and you forget all the stuff that you had back in there.
and then just to remind the commissioners that we will see this again in our November meeting, so.
And if I might, the comments from Commissioner Donchik are spot on actually for this evening also. That just notifies staff to take a look at those 2 specific provisions you discussed with the continued items and decorum. And so when you see it, to make sure that the actual versions are what is being proposed, so you can check back on it and say, okay, now this is what staff's recommending. So if there's any others like that, I encourage the commission to mention it for staff's edification. So again, as it comes back, then you're sure what you know the exact response is, and is it in or is it out?
So if there's no other comments, entertain a motion.
Quick question.
There's another question before the motion, okay.
Should we refer to attachment B in the motion? Or the rules and procedures, the motion for item 10A?
Because it's on the motion.
Not if
provided
we're
to us.
going to accept attachment C.
We're looking at our additional handout, Bob.
The
The
Mr. Webb.
motion talks about, I move to provide direction to staff as shown in attachments B and C. If there is any motion, and I'm not sure that there necessarily needs to be a look at legal counsel, but I think that just providing direction is sufficient.
I'm not arguing, I'm just,
Clarify.
So we don't have to make a motion, Bob, is it?
We're looking for counsel for
Nate?
Mr. Edwards.
Yeah, okay. I'd recommend, I mean, you're styled for action, I believe. And my recommendation would be just read the motion as it is in the staff report, except omit attachment B.
Okay. So we are making a motion.
That's my recommendation.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes.
I move to provide the following direction to staff concerning the Planning Commission's revised rules, policies, and procedures as shown in attachment C. I further move to direct staff to incorporate the direction into the revised RPPs and to bring the RPPs back to this commission at the November 7th, 2017 meeting for review and possible adoption.
And then if I may, if you'd include, that our comments are a part of that direction to staff. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Francine beat you to it, so. It has been moved by Commissioner Lawson and seconded by Commissioner Doncheck. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We're now at item 11, Chair and Commission items. Do we have any future agenda item requests?
quick question, should we request an agenda item for 9?
If I might, Commissioner Bruce, we
Yeah, you
still
need to-
need to lean forward into the microphone.
We still
please.
need to hear you.
Okay, usually people can hear me without a microphone, but anyway, my question was, is should we request an agenda item for what was item 9B?
No, that will come back to us
Okay.
under the 125
That's
day.
fine, great.
Are we doing request for information?
We're still on item A, request for
Okay.
future agenda items. Seeing none, we'll move on to item B, request for information from staff.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Chesney.
I've brought this up. The Design Review Committee has turned into strictly a landscape review committee, really. Excuse me, landscape review committee. And I've spoken with Trevor about it, and I would like possibly for staff to come back with some recommendations on how we could make the design review committee a real design review committee, because we have repeatedly told the public that when these development maps come in and that we'll have another final look at them before they're finally approved and the contractor can put the shovel to the dirt. And that's not really what's happening with our design review committee currently. And I don't know if we want to or would recommend to make it a true design review and really look at the designs, or is it just a beautification review? So I guess what I'm asking is for staff to come back and say, hey, you know, we're either going to make this a design review or this is not, we need to change the name of it.
Right. Through the chair, from Commissioner Chesney, and I appreciate the question. As the long-term secretary to the Design Review Committee, I have seen a bit of an evolution. And in part, it's not the fault of the Design Review Committee. In fact, over the last few years, we've just had so few projects that have been forwarded to the Design Review Committee, and that means we don't have a regular meeting schedule necessarily, and so it's very sporadic. And what tends to happen is there's not that constant.
Sorry, I gotta jump in. We're not agendized.
I was hoping you would.
Yeah, we're not agendized for a discussion of
I'm
design
sorry, I
review
was-
committee. I understand the question is you want some information. The request for information from staff, that's what you're seeking, is some information from staff about
The design
what to do about this, and I think that can be handled. But I don't want it to turn into a discussion off
Then,
the agenda.
That being the case, we will bring this back as a future discussion item.
Any other requests for information from staff? If not, we'll move on to item 12, directors and legal counsel items. A, report on previous planning commission items.
Yes, Madam Chair, I have one item, and Mr. Lloyd has two. The update that I have is your DCA that you heard last time, which is WDCA 17-0004, Care of the Infirmed. That is scheduled to be heard by the Board of County Commissioners on November 14th for a first reading. And assuming that the board does what they normally do each year and cancels their meeting before Thanksgiving, it would probably be heard for the second reading on December 12th for second reading and possible adoption.
Thank you, and I have two items. First of all, I wanted to remind the Planning Commission that the County Commission did, in fact, hear the Ascente project, the tentative map, and upheld the decision by the Planning Commission. The second item I wanted to mention was that starting in November, we will be rolling out the new staff report format. Hopefully, you've all had a chance to take a look at and comment. I've received most of the comments from you regarding that general format. Hopefully, what we want to do is simplify the look of the staff reports, make it easier when you're reviewing it, where to turn to, and hopefully we're removing items that don't necessarily need to be in the staff reports, just simplifying it.
Mr. Lloyd, I have some quizzical looks from fellow commissioners that may not have remembered that they received the document for review or did not receive the document for review. If we were all blind, we each received it individually, if I remember correctly, yes.
By email or what?
Yes, from Mr. Lloyd, sent us an email.
I do believe I sent it out to you all as a group. I know I got comments back from several of the planning commissioners. However, if you did not receive it and you would like to see what it looks like before we roll it out and have any comments before we start really working with this, please let me know and I will resend it.
If anybody would like to receive it again, please contact Mr. Lloyd. Anything else, Mr. Lloyd?
That's all I
Item
have.
B, legal information and updates. Mr. Edwards.
Real quickly, you heard a brief reference to a lawsuit that's pending against the county right now. It concerns dedication of water rights. It is related to the amendment that you passed upon tonight and recommended approval of to eliminate that dedication requirement. If that ultimately is passed, that lawsuit will probably go away and be settled for no exposure to the county. And will curb future risks to the county for takings claims based on the dedication requirement. That's the update that I wanted to give you on that. The amendment is broader than that. It's not just lawsuit related, but it's broader than that, as you already know. Other than that, I don't have anything else. So I feel like I sit over here and I provide legal information all night. You know?
Yes, you do.
So this is like my 8th bite at the apple, usually. That's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. We're at item 13, general public comment. Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Thank you very much.